This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
No, cut that. Keep that. Someday it's going to be worth something.
Russ Wakelin.
You put me in an ATST with frickin' Wookiees attacking me and whatnot?
Now you're talking. And Tom Vasel in the third chair.
It was such a good game that even Bonagor liked it.
With contributions from Total Fangirl.
Vampires do not sparkle.
And our loyal listeners.
Are you crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming, coming at the speed of an agitated teak running full tilt away from a gang of infuriated Ewoks.
Ooh.
Today's edition is brought to you by all of our great patrons over at Patreon. That's right, these are the guys that keep the lights on and pay the bills. And this week we're including Michael Berkegaard, Jacob Burgess, Neil Curtis, Ben Greenman, and Steve Diaz. Missed that one and I know it. Anyway, it's those guys. I'm Geekly McNerdigan, your host. Today our panelists are Russ Wampa Wakelin.
What?
And the Dean of Gaming Podcasting, the Lord of the Dice Tower himself, Tom Vornsker Vasel. Let's begin. Issue number 1. Although a dungeon is generally defined as a strong underground prison cell, especially in a castle, many view the term more broadly, especially gamers. We conjure up all sorts of images such as caverns and tunnels and underground lakes and rivers and much, much more. When we think about dungeons, we populate them with goblins, giant spiders, jellies, mimics, and all sorts of other baddies. The farther we can get from the original definition of dungeon, the better. Question. What is the meaning of the Latin root word often credited as being the ultimate source of the word dungeon? Robidus Russ.
Basement.
Testis Tom.
Light, beware. You're not welcome here.
Yeah, wrong! Tracing the origin of dungeon, donjon from the French, domnion from the vulgar Latin, and finally coming from domnium, coming from what? Dominus or master. Thank you, Spartacus, blood and sand.
Ooh.
Issue number 2. Although most famous fighting in the Star Wars universe is in space with X-Wings and TIE fighters roaring around throwing red and green laser beams at each other while capital ships float around looking dangerous, there's some ground action to be had as well. Let's not forget the intrepid commandos that attacked the deflector shield projector on Endor or the forces lost on the frozen ice fields of Hoth. Question. What did General Solo use to destroy the projector on Hoth and open the way for the Rebel fleet to destroy the Death Star 2? Wooher Wakelin.
Thermite grenade. Or bomb. Thermite bomb.
Max Veers Vasel.
Thermal detonator, mine.
Proton charges. You guys both fail the Star Wars nerd check. Issue number 3. Nothing can be quite so frustrating as sponsoring an event and having no one show up. It's artistic license, Joel. Hang in there. You were the bomb. It brings to mind an old saying, what if they threw a war and nobody came? Although present in countless speeches, at least one song, and a failed movie from 1970, most folks do not know where the quote actually comes from. Question. According to the internets, the quote first appeared in a poem by the German playwright and poet Bertolt Brecht in a poem that argued if you avoid war, it will come looking for you. Much more popular, however, was its appearance in America in the 1960s as the title of an anti-war article by Charlotte E. Keyes that appeared in what seminal magazine? Jerry Rubin Russ.
The New Yorker.
Tiny Tim Tom.
Dog fancy.
Oh, but closer. Tom is much closer. It's McCall's, of course.
Really?
Well known for its deep and cultural significance.
All right.
Issue number 4. There is no doubt that Darth Vader is one of the most formidable villains of all time. Why, in the new FFG game Imperial Assault, of course, it is almost a truism that when Vader arrives, you should probably act like the rebels on Endor and avoid him and try to accomplish your mission regardless, say, sending Luke to distract him. Who would win, Darth Vader or... Although he is questioningly evil through much of his character arc, how does Darth Vader stack up to real, actual evil? Well, in the epic rap battles of history video, Darth Vader versus Hitler, these two figures faced off in, well, an epic rap battle. According to visitors to their site from a poll, which figure won the rap battle? Rodiga Russ.
I'm going to go with Vader.
T-Nutty Tom.
I don't agree with Ross ever, so Hitler.
Oh.
Well, it gets complicated, which fortunately allows me to say that you're both wrong. Darth Vader did win the original, but then Hitler came back to beat him in the sequel, but then Darth Vader crushed him in the third installment, but unfortunately, sadly, since there's 3 and each of you took one, neither of you said both, so you're wrong! And that's it for now. Thanks for listening, and good night.
This episode of the D6 Generation is brought to you by Lone Wolf Development. Take your game to the next level.
And by Geek Nation Tours. Rise up and join the Geek Nation, touring the world at geeknationtours.com.
And by Audible. Try the service, get a free book, and support the show. All by visiting audibletrial.com/D6G.
Hello.
Howdy. Hey, and welcome to episode
160, Craig.
160.
160 of
Do
the
a complete 160. Oh, no, that's a 360.
Nope. 160 of the D6 Generation. I'm Russ Wakelin.
And I am Craig Gallant.
And I am Thomas Vasel.
Hey, Tom. Welcome.
Thomas.
Wow, welcome back to the show, Tom. It is always a privilege and an honor to have someone of your stature in podcasting on our little show here. We really, really appreciate you.
That's only because I'm tall.
You are tall.
This is true. This is true.
So as everybody knows, and it doesn't need repeating, but we'll say it anyway just for completeness, Tom, of course, is the long-tenured host of the Dice Tower podcast. And how long have you guys been?
You may know that. You may be aware.
How long have you been doing that show now, Tom?
10 years. This is the 11th.
11 years.
Who out there even realized podcasting had been around for?
And how many continents, Tom? 10 years and at least 2 continents, right?
I think we got someone in Antarctica, so I can say 7.
7 continents. I was thinking where you're hosting from, but you're obviously heard around the world.
Oh, hosting from.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, just 2.
2. Yeah.
Just 2.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. And how many co-hosts have you been through now?
Wow, I shed them like old clothing.
I was going to say the graveyard is vast.
Well, see, really, I have had 3. No, that was the guy that was there for just 3 episodes, so 4.
Right.
You know how he's the stooge no one remembers.
Right. He's like that James Bond, the one James Bond nobody knows about, right?
But I mean, I also have co-hosts on the video show now too. So
that's right. That's right. Your empire grows. Yeah, the video show is doing well for you too, I hear. That's great. That's fantastic. And that whole Summerer guy seems to be hanging on pretty well now.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, he's excellent. If you listen to most podcasts, you always listen, you're like, which guy does all the work on that show? Because it's usually one guy doing 80% of the work, if it's co-host or such. And I'm not going to ask you guys that, because then you would fight on air and that'd be rude.
Right.
But
I don't think there'd be a lot of fighting.
There'd be some fighting.
Yeah. I don't think there'd be.
But Eric does a lot of the work on ours, which is really helpful. And he has that voice, and he has the editing skills. And he likes different games than me, which is it's a good combo. And he's also one of the easiest people in the world to get along with.
Yeah, he's a very nice guy. And you guys have a great rapport on the air, too, so it's always fun to listen to. So always a great show. So, Tom, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm excited about our topics today because one of my favorite genre topics, of course, is dungeon crawling games, as you will know. And I know, Tom, you are a long time. Now, how long has, Descent been on your top, 10 game list?
I think, it came out 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. So probably 9. I don't know if it hit my top 10 list the first year. And then it kind of wavered right before the Road to Legend came out.
Yep.
I think it started dropping because I was getting tired of these 6-hour sessions.
Right. And then Road to Legend saved the day.
Yeah.
It did.
Great. I remember when that happened.
So we got 2 big topics. First, we're going to talk about dungeon crawling and Mulling Mechanics and generally how different games handle dungeon crawling. But then later in the show, we're going to talk about... You guys
get in a big fight over the definition.
We might. And then later in the show, we get into the new hotness, the hottest dungeon crawler on the planet at the moment, which, of course, is Imperial Assault.
I think what we should do is we should try not to talk about Imperial Assault at all during the dungeon thing.
Let's
think
try.
You can do that?
Let's try that. Let's try that.
We'll see how successful
we'll see how that goes. Right. Okay. So before we get to all that, though, we do have some housekeeping to take care of. So first, we are wrapping up a contest from our good friend. Now, Tom, I don't know if you know this individual, but there's this guy who runs Stronghold Games, and his name is what's his name again, Craig? Steven Bonacore. That's his name.
Oh, right.
Right. Have you ever had him on your show, Tom? I think he's been on.
Well, by accident.
Yeah.
But I do my best.
Right. Next time, just ask me. I'll tell you some of the challenges. Anyway, so Steve was on the show with a great guest as always, and he offered a fantastic prize pack for us to give away.
Giant bunch of games.
And we've gotten great entries, so entries are now closed, and Craig and I are evaluating our massive pile of entries. And of course,
I'll be getting plugged into the computer now.
thanks again to Steve and all the guys at Stronghold Games, because it was in fact the fact that he had this great prize pack of Among the Stars with both expansions, the Ambassadors and Expanding the Alliance, and Core Worlds and both the expansions, Galactic Orders and Revolution. So you're getting two great core games with 2 expansions each for the grand prize winners, and then 2 runners-up each get a copy of one of the core games. Your choice, either Core Worlds or Among the Stars. So lots of great prizes there from our friends at Stronghold. So thank you for all the great entries. And next episode, 161, we will be announcing the wieners and playing all those great entries on the air. So,
and if there's not more than one entry, we are going to look like idiots.
There are many more than one entry.
Oh, good.
Many more. I will say this because I know this, because A, I've looked at all the entries, but B, and more importantly, we did create a bit of a firestorm. I mean,
We did.
not quite as bad as, partially inflated athletic
Equipment.
tools. But the problem we had was we changed the definition of the contest.
We do that all the time.
We do. And just so everybody knows, the actual contest rules have very little bearing on who wins. I think we've been pretty clear about that in the past. So, don't worry too much about that. I'm sure at some point we'll get in legal trouble. But
they're more guidelines.
They're really more
than
guidelines.
rules,
It's like the
really.
code. It's like the pirate code,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So,
I can tell you're using that podcaster stuff anyway, because when you said we have lots of entries,
yes,
I'm like, oh, that means I have at least 3.
The 6, yes. Right.
Are there 6?
There's more than 6.
There may or may not.
There may or may not be
than
more than 6. There's more than 6 and less than 100 is pretty much what I'm going to go on the record for now.
No, that's
I don't want
good.
to spoil
And
it. I don't want to spoil it.
No.
So, but it takes a lot of time into these. So we appreciate everyone who takes the time to do that, because there's a lot of great content and they do great sound work. So good stuff. So also we should probably talk a little about the lost chapters. So Craig and I did meet in Dunkin' Donuts, and we put the call out. Craig, did we not?
We did. We put the call out. We gave you guys at least like 12 hours notice.
There may have been a ball dropped here.
12 hours notice, by the way, is 11 and a half hours more than my high school's business teacher who just quit without any warning last week.
Oh, that's inappropriate.
It's wildly inappropriate for a business teacher, no less. But anyway, we gave you guys 12 hours.
Yeah, so because of that, only one patron. So we asked our patrons, if you have a moment, please join us, and we'll chat with you on the Lost Chapter Live. And because we gave such a great failure in lead time,
dropped the ball.
Only Joel was able to join us.
Thank God for Joel, though.
Joel was awesome, though. So we talked about family gaming and a lot of other great stuff. So tune into that. If you would like to hear more about our Lost Chapters, and by the way, we just put a much larger amount of the Lost Chapter back catalog up on Patreon as well. So if you're interested in all that, Craig, how do folks find us on Patreon?
Well, you want to go to our website, and on the right-hand margin, you'll see the Patreon logo, and you can click on that, correct? Or am I wrong?
That's correct.
Or you could go to patreon.com and search for the D6 Generation. And either way, you will eventually see Russ and I in a video and find out why we are not competing with Tom on video podcasts.
That's right. We don't have his handsome, chiseled looks. That's pretty much the problem.
I don't know. If you're calling me handsome and chiseled, then you're going to need the eye doctor stuff too going on.
Or you just know what we're comparing you to, which is really bad. So.
Actually, fair enough. That's true. I accept that.
There you go.
I mean, seriously.
So thanks for all of our patrons. You guys are doing a fantastic job.
You're making it possible.
You're making it possible. We kicked the new year off right. We already told you we've lowered our ad count on the show, which has been fantastic. So more content. And I was even able to get a new theme for the new segment of the show there that I created there with the news guy, who's a little upset with me really for changing that.
I would imagine.
But yeah, good stuff. So thank you everyone over there for helping us out. So what's it time now for, Craig?
I don't know.
Achievements in gaming.
Oh, the shivers.
It is indeed. And
That's professional right there, Tom.
That's nice job, Tom. So the Achievements in Gaming is brought to us by patron Adam, who wants you to know that the Eclectic Gamer has a site that gives personalized board game ratings based on your preferences. Check out tegratings.com. So now it's time to ask, what are we playing lately? And I'm about
question, Russ.
Yes.
Is one of the goals with Patreon to get rid of that little beeping sound?
No. Actually,
if we make $600 an episode,
right? Well,
then I'm pledging.
Oh, okay. That'd be good. We should run. So, that noise is not meant to be random annoying noise. That noise actually is the sound of
it's a calculated annoying noise.
It is exactly right. It is. So, and now I'm about to ask a question I might regret, which is Tom Vasel. What have you been playing lately?
Oh man. Well, every day I play games, which is a tough life.
It is a tough life.
But the one I'm most excited about is from Plaid Hat Games, Spectre Ops.
Ooh.
I don't know if you guys have heard of this one.
I've heard it, but not seen it in action yet. So tell us about it.
essentially it's Metal Gear, the board game.
Ooh.
Where one person is kind of like doing a Scotland Yard type thing where they're sneaking through a base and trying to disable different objectives that are on this base, and everyone else, so they're keeping track on a piece of paper, and the other players are trying to catch them, but they all have special abilities, and they're the bad guy. Actually, I'm not sure who the bad or good guys are, but the hunters are driving around in a car and jumping out of the car, and they're trying to shoot down this guy when they see him. I loved it. I was really impressed with it. Now, I think it's best with 2 or 3 players. It goes all the way up to 5, and when you play with 5, there's 4 hunters, and one of those hunters is actually a traitor and is on the guy's side who's running, which is pretty cool, but didn't work as well as I thought. But as a 2 or 3 player game, my daughter and I, we've been playing it and really enjoying it. It's one of those few games where like sweat is like literally rolling down my forehead as I'm trying not to, because they're about to jump on you and get you. And they know where you are. They're looking and they're saying, he might be here. And you're like, how did they know? But when you're the hunter, you're going, he might be here. And in your head, you're thinking, I have no idea where he is. So it's really well done. It's done by Emerson. He's done several good games over in the past couple of years, but hooked up with Cody. And it's just, this is yet another game I think that's going to do really well for Plaid Hat.
Great. Great. Cool. And is that general release right now, or is it still, did you get it early?
Oh, it's coming out soon.
Okay,
yes.
Cool. You got it. Why people will email me, where did Tom get that game? He's magic.
It's really soon. The pre-orders went out, and my copy is ahead of them, but not that far. Cool. By the time your episode posts in 2016, it will be out.
All right. We'll keep an eye out for that then. What else you playing?
I played a game called Hyperborea, and I'm pretty sure you talked about this last time, right?
I did. I love Hyperborea. I'm really impressed with that. What do you think?
Right, Craig, and he got you all pumped up about this, right?
Maybe.
Well, good. Well, don't.
Hey, wait a minute. Darn it.
Hyperborea is actually a pretty decent game.
It is a good game.
The problem is that there's a better game that's come out since called Orleans, which does pretty much the same thing. Yeah. That's actually was being kickstarted by Tasty Minstrel, and it's really good. But secondly, if you look at the box of Hyperborea, you're like, wow, these warriors are rushing at you. They look awesome. Yeah, they're cubes. Okay, and when Russ explained it in the last episode, he was saying stuff like, and you get to go out and explore and fight. No, you move cubes.
No, you don't move cubes. The guys
and then when you fight somebody, you remove their figure from the board. There's no rolling dice. There's nothing.
No, that's true.
It's just
that's true.
Cubes. The whole thing is manipulation of cubes. Now, it's an interesting, entertaining manipulation of cubes, but the box is so deceptive. I know people bought that game thinking it looks awesome, and it's a straight up Euro game that's masquerading as something else.
It's very much a Euro. Well, here's the thing. So I know you're not a Euro.
It's an excellent game. I just wanted to correct Russ's misrepresentation.
I got no Euro sense from his reading, Tom. So thank you.
Wow. It's definitely a Euro, but I like it. I like it a lot. I'm surprised you didn't enjoy it. So
No, I did enjoy it. You're just
warning people.
Tell people the truth.
Okay.
The truth must be spoken.
Truth to power, Tom. Truth to power.
All right, fine. I still stand by it, though. It's a solid game. Now, and you are moving little plastic dudes, not cubes, but they are only one per hex, which is it's not as fun as like Rune Wars where you've got like whole armies going out there. So that I will definitely agree.
They are definitely just placeholders. I like the game, but it's when I was like, what's the difference between that guy with the sword and the guy with the is that guy a cleric? Is that guy a fighter? No, that guy's a red cube and that guy's a green cube. Okay?
Okay,
just
fair enough.
Learn that.
I see what you're saying. That's true. Yeah, the factions do tie to the various resources. All right, I'll give you that. Okay. Anything else?
Roll for the Galaxy. This is my favorite game of 2015. It's fun to say that in January.
Right.
But, well, actually, no, Spectre Ops might be. I don't know. They're both good. But Roll for the Galaxy, I don't know if you guys have ever played Race for the Galaxy.
Yes, it's a good game. I like it.
This is the same thing, but with dice.
Now,
they've managed to make it very similar and yet feel like a different game.
Ooh.
I like the dice one better. Essentially, you roll dice behind a screen and then you allocate what you're going to do with those dice this turn.
Yep.
Then you reveal the screens and you hope that people pick different actions that will help you out.
Okay.
It uses the same great artwork from Race for the Galaxy, also known as they didn't bother making new art. But it's a really solid game and went into my collection, which is a very difficult thing for that to happen these days.
Now, let me ask you this, Tom. So I love Race for the Galaxy, but the biggest weakness of that game is teaching it because you have to learn all the icons. Did they sort of tone that down in the dice version?
They tone it down a lot in the sense that it takes a bit to explain how to allocate dice. Okay. But once you get that, every tile this game has these tiles instead of cards.
Yep.
Every tile tells you what that tile does in English. It has some icons, but that tells you what they do. So you never have to explain what an icon does.
Okay.
It's much easier to teach new people.
Sounds awesome. That sounds like one I have to get. Now, also, how's game length? Is it quick?
It's about the same. I'd say if you play with a full set of 5 players, an hour, but with 2 players, I think you can crank it out in 30 minutes.
Nice. Cool. Great. I like the theme of that. It's great. Cool. Anything else you want to cover, or is that pretty much the big one?
I got one more.
All right,
Witness. Cool. Have you heard of Witness?
No. I have not, actually, no.
Now, Witness is a really interesting game, and it's exactly 4 players.
Okay.
And it uses this artwork from this comics from years gone by called Blake and Mortimer. Mm-hmm. It looks a little bit like Tintin artwork.
Right.
Okay. It's from, it was in the Tintin magazine, this comic anyway. So you are 4 different people trying to solve a mystery. There's 64 mysteries in the game. So you open a book and it tells you the introduction to the mystery. And then you open up, each player has their own little book. They open up to the same page. They read their clue. Then you spend 4 rounds whispering the clues you know to the other people. So it has this whisper down the alley effect going on.
Yep.
Because I need to whisper a clue to Russ, who then whispers my clue and his clue to Craig, and totally messes that up,
right.
Of course.
Right.
And then after everyone's whispered the clues, we open another book that asks, that shows like a diagram and stuff, and then it says who was murdered, why were they murdered, and asks like 3 questions. We all write down the answers to these questions, and then we score ourselves. If everybody gets all 3 questions right, we score a 12. So far, the highest I've scored is a 6.
Right.
But so it's a cooperative game, but it's so unique and interesting. The artwork is old-timey, really fun, and each case is so different. And there's 64 of them, and it takes about 15 minutes.
Cool. That sounds really neat. I definitely want to check that out. I like those unique kind of games, and I like games that have telephone in them. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, because there's so many of them.
Well, I'm thinking Telestration is the only other one I've thought of, but I like it. Cool. Craig, what have you been playing?
Let's see. I finally got to play. Everybody's been talking about Michikoru for Machi, whatever. That's the kind of impression it made on me. And so I finally got a chance to play it, and it seems like a fun game, but I felt like I was playing Dominion, which I don't like either. I don't like drafting. I don't like deck building. I don't like any of that stuff. But it was a very fast game, and it was over in like 20 minutes. So it had that for it. Then we played Spartacus again. I'm always excited to get that to the table. And I could tell that it had been a long time since I'd played Spartacus because I got crushed. Which stunk. I had a lot of money every time, and I never managed to do anything with it. But I came in, I think, last or second to last, and we played with 5 players. We were playing with this full expansion and everything. That was fun. And then everybody wanted to try out the new Luchador, which is on shelves now. And that's the one that actually has all the cool moves and everything. So each wrestler is different. They've got strengths and weaknesses. They've got a signature move that's actually a signature move that does different things now. And it was very cool. So we saw all the different, like the big giant fat guy with the dog mask can't do like a drop kick because he can't get up to do it, and all kinds of stuff like that. And that was a lot of fun and fast. So that was exciting.
So Tom,
I'd like to say here that
yes,
I'm coming around. I'm coming around in this game.
I think have you played yet with all the new bells and whistles?
I have. First of all, the 3D ring makes a difference.
It does.
Also, the fact that when you re-roll dice, you can knock out your opponent's dice. That's awesome.
Yep.
Special abilities help, and playing with the right group helps also.
It's huge.
Yes.
Playing with the right group is 100% of the thing.
It's still kind of on the dumb end of the scale, but
it's not a brain burner. That's for sure.
So is wrestling in general. So I think it would be weird to have a pro wrestling game that was smart, because that would be
that's really
oxymoron,
intellectual, and like, oh my god, I've got analysis paralysis. I can't figure out what to do with my hits and blocks. So that was fun. And then one of my students that has turned into a gamer before my very eyes, which was fun to watch because he's also happens to be the captain of the football team, went out and he traded in all of his old cards like Yu-Gi-Oh! And all those other cards, and got himself, first he got Hex XL.
Ooh, good choice.
And then he got Betrayal at House on the Hill.
Ooh.
So I got to watch that in action and help out with a little gameplay of that, and remembered how hit or miss that game is. And you're like 2 hours into the evening before you can figure out whether it's going to be a good game or not. So, but when it's a good game, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and that's what I played.
I never was a super fan of that game, but I know some people are very, very passionate about it.
Yeah, no, I mean whether or not you're a super fan of that game depends on your first 2 or 3 plays. If you got one of the lame haunts, then you're not going to like the game.
But Russ, I think it's a dungeon crawl. You should like it.
That's true. It is a dungeon crawl.
Maybe.
It's a totally a dungeon crawl.
I guess so.
You can level up. You can get hit points. You fight. I mean, I think it crosses all your stupid lists that you make. It would cross that off.
It's missing good components. Well, the new version's better, but the old version is.
No, it's not. They're exactly the same.
Actually, the new version had cheaper components when it first came out.
It's got bad components, and
it's got. What do you mean bad components? What do you want?
It's flimsy.
It's got painted plastic miniatures for all the main characters.
Look, and the mechanics are not great. Just saying.
You're stretching.
Whatever. Yeah, whatever.
Stretching. Okay, look.
You're trying to stretch the evidence to fit your old preconceptions, which is fine.
I object.
It's an intellectual weakness, but it's fine. We all have our,
next week you play Betrayal, I'll play Imperial Assault. How's that?
Well, that's not going to happen.
That's right. All right. So let's see. I've been playing the Pathfinder card game in a campaign format now, because basically this Descent group I've been playing with forever, when one of our members can't make it, we had to have a backup game. So now we play Pathfinder the campaign. And that's been a lot of fun. So that's great. And then also played with my family, played a bunch of games. We played the Black Pirate. This is the Haba game, the Schwartz pirate there, which is the one, Tom, I don't know if you've ever seen this game. This is the one that has the puzzle board, and then all the ships are little wooden ships with little felt sails, and then you have a little bulb that you use to clean out not an aspirator, but what's the thing you clean out like a baby's nose with? A little bulb thing. You have one of those, and you squirt your ships, and you squirt them around the table. So you roll some dice. It tells you how many times you get to squirt your ship, and you're trying to squirt your ship around the board to get it in certain positions around the island, in which case you then pick up little wooden gold coins from the island and put them in your bag. And the goal is to be the player with the most coins in your bag before the end of the game. And the other thing interesting about it is in the center of the board is a black pirate ship. And when you roll the dice, if you happen to roll the black pirate, instead of squirting your own ship, you can squirt the pirate ship. And if you can manage to squirt that so it bumps into one of your opponent's ships, you steal money from their bag. So it's a little fun little dexterity game. I got it from my girls when they were like, 4 and 5. And back then they had trouble with the manual dexterity part of it, and we played it on and off once in a while. We broke it out again for, old time's sake over the weekend, and we had an absolute blast with this silly game. So that was a lot of fun.
The problem with that, I like it, the concept of it, but that bulb syringe, by the way.
Yes.
The thing that you use there, it's just wildly unpredictable.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It's like rolling dice.
No, it's not like rolling dice, because that is predictable, sir. It's a 1 through 6. This, you could blow it up into the ceiling.
That's a good point. Yes, your ship may not move at all. That does happen. So yeah, if you got like 3 squirts, you may only get a move and a half out of them if you're not careful.
Which can be frustrating for kids.
Yeah,
and that's my concern. Yeah. I like the game, but I've played it before, and they're like almost start crying because they cannot get their ship to go the way they want it to.
Yeah, we've had that problem too.
So suck it up and learn how to do it, kid.
That's right. It's right. It's a life lesson right there. That game.
That's right.
Also, then because they got a little frustrated with it, we then played Small World, which my kids love. They love Small World. They can play that game all day. So we played that. That was good fun. And we also played this other silly game we got at Gen Con this year, which was Fun Farm, which is this silly little game that's only really saved by the awesome components, which is these giant, round, almost like stress ball farm animals. So you've got, I think I talked about this in the show before, you've got like a pig and a cow and a horse, and these sort of really cartoony round animals. And you put some cards out and you roll some dice, and the player who figures out that one of the die rolled matches one of the cards quick enough grabs the appropriate animal as fast as you can. So it's got that little Hexex moment. It's like you're always grabbing the sticks in Hexex, basically. So injuries ensue,
nice.
Bouncy animals shoot all over the room. It's
Sounds like an ideal family game.
It's a great game.
If you play this, the first thing you do is you go and get some nail clippers and you say, everyone use these or you're banned.
Yes.
No, I'm not kidding.
What happens if someone comes to your house, Russ, and their Fun Farm animals are slightly deflated?
Well, if they've been inspected
Is it
properly,
fair?
you're okay.
Is it fair?
Right.
What happens if the family bringing the game, right?
Right.
Both families have the fun farm animals,
Yes.
but they have to use their own, and only one side is deflating.
It's really only a problem if it's not a problem if one side beats the other side by triple the score or something.
Okay.
Then it's okay.
So what you're using is this sliding morality scale.
That's right, sliding morality.
Okay, gotcha.
Actually, it's funny.
It's all relative.
So in
I get
gamer world, we say things like, well, did that rule affect the game? Then we don't really care about it. We missed a rule this game. Did it really affect the outcome? No, don't worry about it. Well, finally, we played Black Fleet, which was one of the surprise game I picked up at Gen Con this year. My kids love that game also. Played it again. Good time. So Black Fleet is basically the grown-up version of Black Pirate, essentially, where you actually have decent, really fun rules, nice mechanics around it, and amazing components where you put the little cubes in the ships. Good times. We talked about it before. So
yeah, what's nice is that if you sink your kid's ship and he cries, you're like, hey, your ship just came back, and now you can sink mine next turn.
Right.
There you go.
After a while, your ship gets sunk so often, it's like, oh, okay, whatever.
Right. Yeah. It's not. Yeah. That's an abstraction. You have many ships. It's fleets, Tom. It's fleets of ships. So that is games played. Let's talk about modeling a little bit now, Tom. I know, you're more the board gamer than the modeler, but
I want to
has it. Yeah.
Rumor has it you're thinking about getting back into modeling. Is that correct?
There's a difference between modeling and painting. I never want to get back into modeling.
Good point.
I mean, modeling burn. All right. I've had enough of holding piece together and gluing my finger to my face.
Okay.
I think
and my wife laughs at me every time. But no, I've been thinking about getting into painting. There's the one thing that's really driving this is Small World. I'm getting for the Dice Tower convention, not me, but for me maybe. The new super deluxe Small World. I don't know if you guys have seen this.
I have heard of it. I've not seen any copies of it yet, though.
Oh, it's coming out later this month. Hopefully, I'm holding it in my hands as I listen to this. But I will be. What am I talking about? It's next year already. But anyhow,
I don't
comes
know
with
what time warp he's stuck in.
I don't know.
These wooden tiles that replace it, but they have plastic pieces for the mountains and for the fortresses and for pretty much anything in the game. It's plastic, but they decided at some point that they would be unpainted. And that's fine, but it's bothering me because I'm going to be getting this deluxe glorious edition with, non-painted miniatures.
I got to go buy this stupid thing, Tom. It sounds awesome.
Well, it's like
So what's the scoop?
I think it was like $300 or $400.
Really? Oh, I'm not going to buy
for unpainted.
Unpainted?
Plastic.
Wow, that's
no. If you look at the pictures, it's a pretty. It's like the Settlers of Catan box deluxe thing. It's like that quality.
Is everybody still a token, or are they replacing all the guys too?
No, they're replacing them with wooden pieces.
Really? Oh, wow.
And each faction comes in their own little tuck box type thing.
Oh, wow.
And it all fits in this big wooden chest.
Wow.
And the boards, and they added the 6-player board. Yeah, it's really, really nice.
See,
and what's great about the mountains is your piece fits into the mountain, but like let's say you use the fort fits in the mountain and your piece fits in the fort that fits in the mountain.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm very excited. And so anyway, that's got me pumped. I just got a box today, Cthulhu Wars.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Have you guys seen that?
Yes, I've seen that one.
Now, the miniatures in that are ridiculous.
They're
like as big, some of them are as big as your fist.
Yeah, they're huge.
So maybe they should be painted because they're just like a big blob of color.
Right. Yeah. Well, see, and that's the thing, Tom. We talk about this a lot lately that I'm still painting as much as I ever did as a miniature gamer, but I'm painting board game stuff. So it's like board game components have become so beautiful now that as a miniature gamer, like I got to go paint this. So I go off and paint Imperial Assault guys instead of, Privateer Press stuff or whatever.
I told my wife I have 2 goals if we ever get rich. One is to go to the grocery store and buy whatever I want. Okay? I know it doesn't sound like a big deal to most people, but I just think that would be cool.
That's awesome.
Secondly is to hire someone who's their only job. I get a board game, I just hand it to him and say, bling this out now. And it's his job to paint all the miniatures, to do everything, and I get it back and it looks wonderful. So those are my 2 goals.
All right. That sounds like a plan. Great.
That's the modeling I did in my head this week.
That's great, Tom. That's awesome. And you shared with us a hot new game coming out. The news guy's in the corner over here saying, this is what happens when you cancel my segment. I could have told you all about that.
That's true.
So, Craig, what have you been working on?
Well, let's see. Our friend Dave acquired himself a line of sci-fi miniatures over the summer.
What, you mean an entire line? Like an
actual line. For sale online.
Okay.
And he's been, since the summer, he's been like, hey, want to paint some of these, see what they're like? And I've been like, generic sci-fi, you know. And so thinking that maybe Firestorm Invasion might be landing on my doorstep at some point in the not so distant future, I thought I better look at those and at least see. And they're actually really cool looking little models. They're sort of anime inspired generic fantasy, but it looks sort of corporate. It's like kind of a corporate look to it. And the line includes a little squad of 5 sort of security guys in armor in little like almost like rebel guy helmets. And then there's a corporate executive. These are all names in my head that I just came up with. I don't know what they're supposed to be, but it's like a executive looking guy with a little goatee. And then there's an executive looking woman who looks really dangerous. And then a team of 3 women that like a tech team, and then 2 little floaty robots. And I painted them all up in 2 nights. And they painted really fast. I really enjoyed it. I tweeted it out if you're interested in pictures. And if you're interested in pictures, actually, there's a link on my Twitter also where you can get the miniatures if you're looking for something for Shadowrun or like other sci-fi role-playing games and stuff. So that was fun and fast. And I'm working on a special super secret project with the rest of my modeling time that requires these ridiculous little N-scale railroad buildings.
Ooh.
And somebody turned me on to actually I found them at a local railroad model railroading store, and they're really expensive in the United States. It's called Tomy Tech is the company. Mm-hmm. They make how much would you pay if this was like 28 millimeter, right? These models come partially assembled and fully painted.
Wow.
They're like beautiful modern or sci-fi looking buildings with logos on them, and I mean the whole 9 yards. And if you get them from Japan, they're actually quite inexpensive for what they are, especially considering that putting them together is relatively easy because they're partially assembled in the box, and they come painted like Star Wars. X-Wing level pre-paints. It's really nice quality pre-paints. So I've been loving those. I've got 2 boxes from Japan now. It's sort of an addiction, I'll admit. Building all kinds of cool buildings and cool looking buildings and industrial complexes. But anybody out there, if you've got a source for Tomy Tech or any of these other cool Japanese N-scale buildings that doesn't require paying for really ridiculous shipping from Japan, email me, Craig at the D6generation.com. Cause it is an addiction. I've got some awesome stuff, but yeah, this shipping is starting to kill me. And that's what I've been doing. Russ, how about yourself?
All right. Well, as I mentioned, I've been painting up my guys from Imperial Assault.
Uh-huh.
And it was nice. So Adam, one of our local players, he was kind enough to start painting my heroes up. Mm-hmm. And, I think I mentioned this, Josh, who's also in our group, he has a copy of the game. He's painting the Stormtroopers. So that's left me to paint pretty much everybody else. So I've cranked through, those. And also, to thank Adam for painting my heroes, I've agreed to start painting some of the Pathfinder heroes from the Pathfinder card game, because there's still heroes you put out on the table. He's got some of the plastic figures from Reaper for that. So I'm painting up my little halfling bard for that also.
Oh.
So that is it for modeling. What about other geeky goodness? Tom, how about books, TV shows, movies? What have you been seeing on that front lately?
Well, for books, I read I think it's called the Kingslayer Chronicles.
Yes.
The Name of the Wind.
Yeah. What'd you think?
And it was great. I got it at a flea market type thing, and the guy said it's a really good book, which they always lie about. Right, so I wasn't sure. And I read it, and I really put other things to the side so I could finish this book.
No, it's really nice. Yep.
I was impressed between reading this one and then I immediately put the next one on my Kindle and read that one. How I read like 5 chapters of a guy at a tavern who went around and talked to people, and that was pretty much all that happened. It didn't really matter that much. Nothing major happened, and I was fascinated the entire time.
I know, right?
I have no idea how he did that. He makes mundane things interesting.
Yep. Yeah, great book.
It's a great story, and I'm pretty ticked that the third one's not out yet.
Yes.
But I'm closer to it than people who probably read the first book when it came out, so that's always a good thing.
Hopefully. Yeah. Math being what it is.
Yeah, well, Robert Jordan still haunts me.
That's true. That's true.
Troy Rising is a series by John Ringo.
Yes.
Yep.
We've read that.
I read the first book a while ago, and I remember loving it. Mm-hmm. It was such an interesting book. I loved the whole idea, the main concept of the book of how a useless item, not a useless item on Earth, but how an item on Earth becomes extremely popular.
It's from New Hampshire, no
alien
less.
Galaxy.
It's a New Hampshire item, actually, that saves the day. Just saying.
Yeah, well, that's the only thing you guys got. But
well, it's weird because there are better places to obtain it than New Hampshire, but for some reason they got it in New Hampshire.
Yes.
And of course, we're talking about maple syrup.
That's right.
So the first book was really good. Mm-hmm. The second book was good. And the third book, I read like 30 chapters, which seemed to say, hey, South American culture is different than U.S. culture. I was really confused. It got very boring. It advanced the main story, but it took a side trip down this just blah.
I enjoyed all three books, but I think the first was strongest. I'd agree with you on that.
But the third one just went on and on and on about these people who didn't get along. And it was like, okay, they don't get along. That's fine. And then they never really even resolved it. It was just I don't know.
Yeah.
Then they got back to fighting aliens, which was what I had come to read about.
Exactly.
So
the end wrapped it up nicely. So.
And then the rest of the time for my book reading, I'm reading short stories. The Kindle has you can get for like $1.99, download a book with 100 sci-fi short stories in it. And I'm loving that.
Oh, cool.
So I just keep reading and reading and reading them.
That's a good idea. I'll have to check that out.
I like short stories because I can finish them, in a single shot.
Right. Yeah.
Nice.
And sometimes they leave you just. So I'll think sometimes more about a short story than I will about a whole novel.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if it's terrible, you'll be done quicker.
That's true. That's true. Right. Yep.
For TV, I'm really, really enjoying the show Gotham.
Oh, me too. That's a great show.
I was afraid I wouldn't because it follows kind of the Smallville thing where they obviously going to deviate from Batman, and I'm very big on Batman. Mm-hmm. But I decided I don't care.
Yeah,
it's so well written, and the interplay between the two main detectives is funny.
Yep.
The new villains that they brought in who, aren't part of the main Batman universe, but just the crime bosses are really well written, and the Penguin is amazing.
Penguin
the show should be called
show.
The Penguin.
It should be called The Penguin. He's amazing.
Because, I'm going to be interested how they're going to ever make him fat.
Oh,
does he start eating at some point? But it's really enjoyable. My wife and I are apparently morons because we watched Gallivant. And
did you like it?
Russ said we were stupid, and it was objectively not very good. So
that's what I thought.
Yeah,
did you like
you're
it?
Wrong. I really did.
Really?
Well, see, I think you went in with expectations. You said Monty Python. Well, it's Monty Python-esque to some degree, but it's a lighter humor than that. The guy who plays the evil king, is a tremendously good actor.
Oh, he is.
He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, he's great in Psych. I loved him in Psych.
And I've enjoyed it. The first episode was okay, but as it's been going on, I've really been having a good time. The songs are very catchy, and so you're wrong.
All right. Well, here's the thing. I didn't get past 20 minutes into it, so it didn't.
And also, I don't do that.
You can't do a review. Well, Russ.
No.
Here I have been.
A show can't get me past.
That's fine, Russ. But
seriously.
That's your review.
Yes.
Your review of that is I couldn't watch more than 20 minutes of it.
That's
your
right.
review is not, oh my God, it sucked. It was awful. It was commercials every 5 minutes. You don't know if it was commercials. I know because I watched the whole thing, and here I am like an idiot having a conversation agreeing with you, and you don't even know what you're talking about.
All right, look.
But how many TV shows have had not that great pilot episodes? A lot of them.
I am willing to go to the mat on this. If you are a Gallivant fan, then you should listen to the Dice Tower. If you're not a Gallivant fan, you should listen to the D6 Generation.
Wow, he's putting his money where his mouth is.
That just tells you everything you need to know right now.
Wow. Okay.
So, Craig, what did you think of Gallivant? Did you like it? Should you go join Eric Summer on the other show?
Hey, Eric likes it too. So
see, this clears it all up.
I will admit that as I've said, because I actually have been watching the whole thing. It's much better with watching it on TiVo, where you can fast forward through the inordinate number of commercials.
Where they also sing, by the way, just saying.
No, only the first day.
Oh, thank God. That's good.
And so, but also clearly you caught that in the first 20 minutes, so you wouldn't know if they sang all the way through. Except that I was foolish enough to tell you that they did. Anyway.
All right, fine. What is the redeeming
my
quality?
theory was it was going to get better as more of the cameos occurred, and I think that is actually what's happening. I'm only halfway through the third installment, and already Weird Al Yankovic and his singing monks because they took a vow of I can't remember what they call it, but they instead of a vow of silence, they take a vow of singing. They're not allowed to talk unless they sing. So that's kind of funny. Although they sort of throw that whole conceit away when they're like, stop singing and tell me what I need to know. And so he stops singing. But, yeah, I mean, it's still not, I don't think it's super great. I'm not really enjoying it a lot, but I'm still watching it. And it's definitely got its moments that I'm enjoying. So I'm between the two of you, except that I don't give Russ any validity now because he only watched 20 minutes.
Well, wait a minute. I'm not saying it's super great. I enjoyed it. I'm just, I took umbrage to the fact where someone said something to the effect of it's objectively bad. And I thought, oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't know
that might have been me.
No, it wasn't you.
No, it wasn't me. Okay,
I wrote these things down.
He wrote these things down. He's made notes. Look, I did not.
I'm getting you, Craig.
Work for me at any level.
Oh, good. I can't
any
wait.
level. So, yeah, if you guys are willing to suffer for your art, I can appreciate that.
I'll suffer for our art.
Anyway.
All right. What else are you watching there, Tom?
I'll talk about Flash on your thing.
Okay.
And Agent Carter, but I'm still kind of in the Netherlands looking for something interesting, and I'm always afraid to get into a new show because I'm afraid they'll cancel it.
Yeah.
So I always wait till the first season's over, but then if I don't watch it and everyone does that, then it doesn't get made. It's like a catch-22.
It is. I think they're going to cancel Constantine, and I like that show.
Yeah.
But I mean, I may be weird on that one, but
for video games, I don't play them very much.
Yeah.
I played Civilization. I downloaded Civilization 4 because I saw Civilization 5 and I was like, ooh, Civilization 4 is probably pretty cheap, and it was.
Right.
I said I'll play it for a few hours.
Danger.
2 weeks later.
Yeah, right.
You know,
you can lose your life in that game.
Yeah, I taught my daughter how to play it, so then
that's good. Keeps
I get her.
busy.
And I'm also playing this new game. Well, I guess not new. It's been out for several years. Terraria.
Yep.
Which is just this dumb little. I guess it's a 2-dimensional version of what's the block game everyone
Minecraft,
loves?
kind of a Minecraft variant. Yeah.
And I'm getting kind of addicted to it to some degree. I'm more of a 2D guy than a 3D guy anyway.
Right.
You know, as old folks, but. That's been going good. Although I might try that game that you keep raving about. I'm tired of hearing you talk about it on your show.
Dragon Age?
Yeah, but I might try it out. Is it better than Final Fantasy Tactics? That's what I want to know.
Well, they're different games. So, but
you said best role playing game ever.
Oh, it's yes. I would go to the mat.
Objectively,
it is objectively the best role playing game ever made by humanity. No, I think it's better, but I prefer American style RPGs over Japanese style RPGs. So if you're a Japanese RPG fan and like the little tactical grid and all that stuff, that's not Dragon Age is not that kind of game. If you like really cool stories with really cool plot twists and active character development in your entire party, then this game is for you.
I might try it out.
It's very long and very time consuming, so beware. Just saying.
All right, now here's some thoughts I had.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
I know that it's Oscar season and they're going to nominate a whole bunch of movies that I've never watched and probably won't.
Yes.
And then I watch them and there's lots of angst in them, and that's great. Yeah. I'm all for character development and blah, blah, blah. But sometimes some people in the world, and myself is included, want to watch a sweeping battle. And there's very few movies that do that. I mean, like one a year, maybe, that do sweeping fantasy battles. Yeah. So I really love The Hobbit, and it was great. Right. And I'm pretty sure, Craig, that when they do the extended version, they'll show a scene of them feeding the goats in the cave. Okay.
That's all I asked for. That's all I wanted to see.
Right. I like the goats.
I really, it never even occurred to me that they were magical teleporting goats until Craig said that. I was like, oh, that's true. Where did they come from? It just didn't occur to me. Maybe they had a bag of holding, and you can't discount that.
I'm not like a super detail guy. I just need a nod in the general direction of physics.
I don't think The Hobbit was perfect. I think, for one thing, they criminally undercut Bjorn. That was just, they should have had him in the movie a lot more. But
you didn't like just watching him get dropped?
I know. Oh, they dropped him. I was like, yes. Wait,
airdropping Bjorn. Okay, that's it.
But I love big battle scenes, and so I was very pleased by it for the most part. And I think it's going to be one of those movies that for the next 10 years is going to be cool to hate. Like, oh yeah, I didn't like The Hobbit. Me neither. How did it make $1 billion? I don't know. I didn't watch it. Yeah. But I'm going to unabashedly say I enjoyed it. I'm glad Peter Jackson did 9 hours of it. If he had split into 6 movies, I would have been happier, because Why would we not want more of a good thing? If he had made a TV series of it, let's say 5 years ago they said, we're going to make a TV series of The Hobbit. It's going to be 10 episodes. Everyone would have been like, wow, that's great. It's the same thing as 3 movies.
Okay.
How do people not see that?
Well, right there, you're yelling at a hypothetical person, Tom. So I got to calm it down a little bit.
I love it.
Because that person doesn't exist. That argument wasn't made. It's okay. Take a deep breath.
What do you mean argument wasn't made?
Nobody here is saying that they shouldn't have made a TV show out of it.
No, I'm saying the TV show would have been 10 hours, and everyone would have been excited about that.
Right, but you're yelling at those everyone. That's the problem.
I'm yelling at you guys for complaining that it was 3 movies.
No, Russ thought it was great.
No, the third one I liked, but I will say I thought that the other two. Here's my fundamental problem with the picture. I love the final battle, and the 5 armies battle was great, and it's essentially, plus or minus a few things, mostly out of the book. That's fine. It's more that the rest of the 2 movies, the other 8 hours of film, is not about the title character, the Hobbit. But unfortunately, Bilbo has very little screen time. And so it's kind of like, he's underplayed. He never really does. And they cut out a lot of the things that actually translated to the Hobbit saving the day. For example, the way Smaug died, in the actual film had nothing to do with Bilbo.
Right.
But
That's
in the
true.
book,
I wondered why they
Bilbo
cut that.
single-handedly did that. And they just cut that. And I don't know why they cut that out. I mean, they had the chink in the dragon's armor, but why didn't Bilbo tell the bird and have the bird tell? I mean, why leave that out?
Well, you don't have talking birds in the movie version.
Well, yes, you do. Gandalf's talking to every animal under the sun. So is bird poop guy. So, I mean, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, but they did. Gollum and Bilbo's scene was amazing.
Yes,
and I'll go to the mat on that. Smaug is the best dragon on film ever. There's not even a close second.
Oh no, that's true too. I like. Don't get me wrong. I liked Smaug. That part was awesome. More of that would have been great.
I'm saying there's an awesome movie in there somewhere.
There is,
which means all the awesome parts were there.
Yeah, there was no need for the love triangle. That was just a waste of screen time. I am sorry, but it was. But anyway, sorry. We don't need to pick apart the Hobbit.
You're not sorry, but go ahead.
Unabashedly, he loves the Hobbit. That's right. That's good.
The third was my favorite. The third was my favorite. So I'll agree with you there, Tom. All right. So, Craig, how about you?
Yes. I am now listening to Firefight, the next book in the Reckoners series by Brandon Sanderson, which I really enjoyed the first one, Steelheart. And if you like comic book hero stories, but you're looking for a book to read, then you could do much worse than this story by Brandon Sanderson. I really enjoy it. The narrator's fantastic, all the different voices that he does, and the story is really cool. I did not know there was an interim short story that went between. Like, a lot of these authors nowadays seem to be like they put out 1 book a year for their series, but then between the 2 books they put out a short story that sort of bridges the 2, or even just sort of whets your appetite for that universe. And so I found that out after I was listening to Firefight, and they kept going, oh, we're like when we fought mitosis 6 months ago. Oh yeah, remember mitosis? I'm like, oh crap, mitosis, what's that? And I looked it up, and it's the short story. So I downloaded that to my Kindle, or actually my tablet now, because my wife got me a tablet for Christmas. And so I'm reading that while at the same time listening to Firefight, which is awesome, because if you remember anything from the first book, Firefight, of course. Well, actually, I can't tell you without spoiling it. So there's a really cool relationship between Firefight and the Reckoners, and one Reckoner in particular. So it's very, very cool. Really enjoying that. Of course, I get my Audible because I once took a 30-day free membership trial from Audible, and I stuck with it for the last 4 years.
That's right.
Russ, where would you go for this Audible free trial?
I still believe Audible's the best possible way to read books. And if you want to get more information on Audible, head over to our website. Click the Audible link in the upper right-hand corner, and that will take you over to the Audible deal, which is 30-day free trial and a free credit, which is basically a free book. And even if you decide not to stick with Audible, you get to keep that book forever and never pay them a dime. No. And we've been members for a long time. Long time. I have hundreds of books now, literally, in Audible.
I have over 100, and I didn't realize how that happened.
It's very quick. Your library grows very quickly.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's great. And don't forget that 30 days, not only do you get that one credit, and that's great, but that 30 days, and you're a full member. So any sale or special offers they have in those 30 days for members, you get those. And that's really where the value comes in. Right now, they're running a 2 for $3 sale that's just incredible. It's just every now and then, actually quite often, they run these sales. And so you can do really pretty amazing things with your credit. So cool. Great stuff. Anyway, so what else? Speaking of not getting into a series until it's been on for a while, like Tom just said, I have just discovered The Blacklist, which is a series that now is halfway through its second season, and I am loving it.
Is this the Twilight Zone style series?
No, this is not. The Blacklist is basically an anti-hero, FBI most wanted, who, for reasons of his own, turns himself into the FBI and offers them this list of the people in the world that are so bad even the FBI doesn't know they exist. They're like the really, really, really bad people that are actually causing all of the really bad things in the world to happen.
Yep.
And so in exchange for this list and his help, like, they have to leave him alone. So he's off doing his own crime empire stuff while at the same time helping them catch all of these bad people. But over the course, like, it's one of these great series where each episode builds on the next. And so what you find out is that he's singling out the specific people he's offering the FBI so that he can get something as these people get taken down, because he's building up his own, he's got his own motives that are moving him forward. Amazing character. James Spader is great. I love it. It's fantastic. I did not dislike a single episode, and I'm now all caught up. And I can't wait for the Super Bowl. Not for the Super Bowl, because, all this ball stuff. But right after the Super Bowl, the second half season premiere of The Blacklist on NBC. So I'm super excited about that. And as Tom said, this is Oscar season, and as longtime listeners know, my wife is all wrapped up in Oscar season, and we try to watch all of the Best Picture nominees. So we've been working on that. I've mentioned Foxcatcher, which I hated, and The Theory of Everything, which I loved, and Tom then, of course, reminded us of the horrible Stephen Hawking incident from 2 years ago at Gen Con. Where we got forbidden to ever do anything Stephen Hawking. So I hope that my love of this movie and my support of the main guy, Redmayne, what's his name, for best actor will undo some of the damage that was done by that unfortunate incident. And then we watched we saw American Sniper, which of course is the big, huge record-breaking movie that's out right now, causing all kinds of controversy. And all I will tell you is it's a very well-made movie. It is not the pro-war propaganda movie that a lot of people would have you believe that I don't think saw the movie. So it shows both sides. I mean, there is an element of that, anyway, I'll let you decide, but But I think it's a very well-rounded image. It speaks to a lot of the issues that my friends who have been over there and come back speak to. And so I really enjoyed it. Emotionally crushing, extremely affecting movie. So I really enjoyed that. And to lighten things up a little bit, I took my son to see Paddington, which was an awesome kids movie.
Oh, you liked it? Oh, good.
It was great. He, not so much. He's in a phase now where he doesn't like bad guys.
Oh. Well,
and I'm trying to explain to him that in any movie that he sees, the bad guy is always going to lose, and then they're just there to make the good guy look good. But he still doesn't believe me. So, but I thought it was very well done. It's a very nicely plotted film as well.
Oh, nice.
And that's good, because a lot of these more modern kids movies, like the Where the Wild Things Are and etc.
Yeah, they ruin them.
They're not supposed to be as good as the source material. So it's good to hear about Paddington.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's a kids movie, so don't expect anything super sophisticated, but I really enjoyed it, and it's got a really nice message. And then one thing about video games, which I didn't have until about an hour and a half ago, when my son said, Dada, I learned how to play Minecraft yesterday with my cousins. And I was like, that's great. No big deal. Mommy said I could put it on my tablet, but you have to teach me how to play. So apparently I have to learn how to play Minecraft.
There you go. He'll make a video game fan out of you yet, Craig. It's going to happen.
So that's all me. And what about you, Russ?
Well, real quickly, because we're going long, but
we are going
I blame
long.
Tom. So first is
you would.
books. I just finished. This is actually a book for work I was reading. It's actually a book about management. I listened to it on Audible, Creativity Inc., which is actually by the founder of Pixar. But I mentioned here because I know there's a lot of Disney nerds on the show. And if you're interested in the recent history of Disney and Pixar, and there's also a lot of geek trivia in this because this gentleman who wrote the book, he is one of the guys behind a lot of, obviously he runs Pixar, a lot of the genesis of all CGI. He's one of the first guys to do a computer animated hand, all these great things, really great stuff. But also talks about how Disney has changed and how Pixar changed in parallel and how they later became to run now when Pixar and Disney merged over, a few years ago. He and his partners who founded Pixar now run all Disney animation as well. So they kind of brought back, and they're charged now with kind of bringing Disney back because it turned out that Disney hasn't had a number one movie or had not until Pixar took over, until Frozen came out, for example, which is a post-Disney Pixar merger in a while. So if you're interested in Disney and geeky technology kind of stuff, and if you happen to be interested in management theory, it's also a pretty good book there too. So Creativity Inc. is kind of a fun read.
On a side note, did anybody hear that George Lucas is now upset because he sold all of his ideas for a whole new trilogy to Disney, and they've decided to trash it, and none of his stuff made it into the next movie?
I don't think he was worried about that.
Me neither. I thought it was funny.
And finally now the student has become the master. So I was waiting for a long time. I've had a blast as your kids were, and I don't know, Tom, if you must have run in this now because some of your kids are older than mine, but when your kids are younger, you as the parent, as sort of the nerd parent, you're sharing all the cool nerdy stuff with them. Oh, you should read, these books. I loved them as a kid. I was sharing Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy with my daughter and all these other books. Finally, Rose came to me and said, Dad, have you read these books? And I've been telling him it's the books with the words spelled wrong. This is the book Magic with a Y. It's Magyk, also known as the Septimus Heap Chronicles by Angie Sage. And my daughter Rose started reading these books, and there's a whole series. I think it's like 5 or 6 books now. And they're all names of common sort of fantasy related magic stuff, but they're all spelled kind of funkily. And she's really loving it. So I'm getting them on Audible and going to listen to them. So I'm really excited that my daughter's now recommending books to me. So that's kind of cool.
Oh, cool.
And actually there's going to be a movie made for that too, I think. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's movies.
They're making movies for everything now. So who knows? Shows. Yes, I've been watching Flash. Now, Tom, are you liking Flash? You kind of on the edge with Flash.
Yeah, I'm not as far as you in it. I've watched a few, and I decided to pause and watch it with my kids because, I'm always worried with these. Like, I wouldn't watch Gotham with my kids, for example. But The Flash it's like a superhero comic. I mean, they're not trying to change it to make it like edgy and today. No, it's like the real Flash. He's a little less sarcastic. The Flash was always like a practical joker, and I'm not feeling that from him, but that's still okay.
Yeah, I agree with you because I think Arrow, which of course is written in parallel, there's a lot of crossovers with the two shows. Arrow is definitely a little darker and more teen angsty or angsty in general than Flash is. I agree with you. Flash is more fun. I'm liking it, and you're right. I want to have my kids watch it now because I think it's that kind of show. So I'm loving that. Have you seen Agent Carter yet? I've been watching Agent Carter with the whole family, and the whole family's loving it. Yeah.
I've only watched the first episode, and again, this one I definitely wanted to watch because, as you know, I have 6 daughters.
Yep.
And I feel like, yes, a show about a female heroine who's not
wimpy. Right.
It's hard to explain. She's not like sleazing her way to the top.
Yes.
I didn't want to watch Alias with them, for example.
Right.
It might be entertaining, but
right.
This is pretty cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah, we're loving that too. My daughters are loving it as well, so really enjoying that. And finally, I just started watching, honestly, in the interest of full disclosure, I've only watched the first 15 minutes of the first episode.
Once again, here we go.
So you may now disregard
of what? Agent Carter?
So no, the librarians. So So here's what happened. Nicole was on a road trip. As listeners know, she's also an automotive journalist, so she was out at the Detroit Auto Show. So I'm like, I got to watch a new show, and she's gone, and we haven't seen the librarians, and it's on Netflix or something now. So I started watching it, it's on Hulu and Xbox for free right now because they're trying to promote it. It's a brand new series. Started watching it. In the first 15 minutes, I was hooked. And not only was I hooked, I was like, oh my God, I got to pause this. Nicole would love this show, and I can't watch her without her. So the closest thing I can describe it to, and this is going to immediately turn some people off, and it's not for everybody probably, is it felt like Doctor Who, but the good Doctor Who, like David Tennant Doctor Who. So that's as far as I get. It's nothing like Doctor Who in terms of theme or anything else, but just the way the lines are delivered, it's very English. You have this sort of know-it-all person like the Doctor in these really bizarre situations. But basically the premise is modern-day Earth, everything's normal, except in the middle of like a gunfire fight in the first 15 minutes of the first episode, a sewer pipe opens up and this guy walks out in a perfectly crisp, like you'd imagine like an Oxford librarian suit, and starts like dealing with this thing. Meanwhile, there's a SWAT officer trying to fight these terrorists, and while she's doing this guy's like ignoring her and doing some kind of super like Indiana Jones archaeological thing in the corner, and the dialogue and everything is just really, really fun. I don't want to spoil any of the lines, but worth a look if you like that kind of quirky English sort of stuff. The Librarians is probably worth a look.
Well, I see this is a spin-off of the Librarian TV films that came out.
Maybe I didn't see those. So
those were really fun. I really enjoyed those. I mean, they were campy. They were like, TV Indiana Jones.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing. It's definitely like that Doctor Who Indiana Jones kind of weird, not obviously over the top craziness, but I really enjoyed the first 15 minutes of the first episode. So with that in-depth analysis, I'll leave you with that. So I think, is that achievements, everybody?
Yeah, I think I can now go watch 15 minutes of something.
And then do a review.
The D6 generation. Not as smart as Yoda, but not as dumb as Jar Jar Binks.
Wise, the announcer is. Hello.
Hey, now it's time to talk about our friends. And you know what that sound means? Our friends at Lone Wolf Development. They bake
greatness into every product they make.
The smells coming out of there are fantastic. Our friends at Lone Wolf.
That spray, that chocolate chip cookie spray.
They make the best software for gamers, really. Whether it's the ones that got Craig and I in love with them, which was Army Builder, the best way to quickly do lists up for your complex miniature gaming needs, such as all the games from Games Workshop games to Privateer Press. To
Spartan games to Fantasy Flight games.
You name it. They're all in there. Makes it quick and easy. And because it's one tool, once you've done it once, you've learned it. You know it. And you can export your lists.
The program takes care of everything.
It really does. Or let's say you're a role player. Well, then you want to use Hero Lab because it's a fantastic way to track and build all your great characters for, again, any system you want. But they really do a great job on Pathfinder in particular because they got a whole special app just for the iPad. You can do like an interactive live character sheet right on your tablet, which is just really, really cool.
Yeah.
Loving that. Now, let's say you're a game master. And, of course, Realmworks, which has just hit the streets, well, I guess about a year ago now, but people are really getting into it now, is fantastic.
Brings it all together.
I love my Realmworks. I do all my campaigns in there. It makes it so much easier, so easy to track everything. And here's the thing. Once, like in D&D 5e, I put all my conditions in there as they come up. And now every time I go in and I got to think, what does stun do? It's right there. Boom. Right. I don't have to look at it anymore.
Oh, there you go.
Once I add each monster in each scenario, I put a monster in there. Next time I go to add an orc, boom, orc's already in there for me. Great way, great tool, fantastic, great use. I love my party members love the player view, a separate screen so they can see only what they see, and I can control with Cloud of War exactly what parts of the dungeon map they see as they turn that corner of the dungeon. I just kind of shade it with a little virtual pen, and all of a sudden, poof, it explodes right on the screen for them.
It's craziness.
It's so awesome. So check it all out. Head over to wolflair.com and check out all the amazing software.
It's real. These are the products that make the onerous parts of playing games a great part of the game itself.
Exactly right. I think the wolf's off playing games.
That was sick. It was a sick wolf.
And now, in an attempt to bring a small amount of dignity and decorum to this otherwise base form of entertainment, and I use the term loosely, I am proud to present... Oh, get on with it. It's time for App of the Ep. Seriously, Wakeland, I used to have my own segment, and now I'm relegating to announcing this Hey, you're lucky we still use you. App of the Ep this time is brought to you by patron Robert Oswald, who wants to give a shout out to Firestorm Armada's Admirals League. Can't wait to engage you all in battle at the Schaumburg Offensive Tournament at Adepticon. See you in the storm, boys. And welcome back to App of the Ep. And as I've said before, I use the term app a little generally here. So oftentimes it refers to a mobile app you might find on a phone. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about a game you will play on your Xbox 360, or no, sorry, it won't be on your Xbox 360, but an Xbox One or your PS4, or maybe on your PC. And that, of course, is Assassin's Creed Unity. Now, it's sort of an interesting time to review Assassin's Creed Unity. It came out back in November, and while I did get it almost immediately because my daughter gave it to me for my birthday and was very excited, Dragon Age Inquisition came out right at the same time, and because I'd heard about a lot of the bugs in Unity, I went right to Dragon Age Inquisition, got totally sucked in, and have to say I finally finished Inquisition, and I loved it. Wigglin, you brought in the ability to talk about Age again? Yeah, I'm going to talk about Dragon Age one more time, but I'll try to stop slipping it in anymore. I've moved over now to Assassin's Creed Unity. Now, I was very nervous trying out Unity because I had heard so many problems with bugs. And I have to say, though, what's really exciting about it is that it is the first Assassin's Creed built entirely for the next generation of consoles, and it really shows. The parts of the game that are working work fantastically. So the graphics are amazing. You can really see the hairs on the characters' heads. And you can really notice because like Dragon Age looked great, but you could also really see that it was designed to also run in the older consoles. So even though I played on the Xbox One and it looked good, and you know, I played a Black Flag, which also looked good, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, but you could tell it was also written for the 360. So there's little parts that are better, but this really, really shines. Some amazing moments. Not only are the character models amazing and the eyelashes and all that, but like when you synchronize in Assassin's Creed, you know, it always pans out. And this time you're in revolutionary France in Paris, and as it pans out, it really pans out very, very far. And one of the most amazing scenes actually is when it pans out when you're on top of Notre Dame. There's a big crowd of people rioting in the streets right after the revolutions happened. And as it pans out, in most games, as they pan way, way back in scenes like that, they remove the character models. But in this one, they don't. So as it pans all the way out and you're seeing like the entire island and indeed most of the city of Paris, as it pans out, you still see the people down there. And I was playing multiplayer and I could see one of the other assassins running across the rooftops doing this little parkour thing as it panned out, which is really, really cool looking. I'm loving the story. I don't mind the changes to the controls. So they did make some slight tweaks. Some of the reviews said the game was hard. I'm not finding that at all. I think it's reasonably difficult, but I like the challenging pace. And so I'm really, really enjoying it. The story's good. I think the pacing's great. It's very engaging. I like the missions. The only problem, and the other thing they did, which was nice, is they added a lot of co-op elements to the game. So, one other thing before I go there, though, is another thing they did really well. So I love Black Flag because, well, pirates. And it's still probably my favorite Assassin's Creed game. But one of the things in Black Flag that kind of went away was they hinted at, and there was a couple of scenes where you could see the future and remember that you're back in the DNA time. You know, you're in someone's body and DNA in the future, just kind of reliving this stuff. But it's very, very separated, and it's almost an afterthought. But they brought back an interesting way and a really neat thing in Unity. What they did was the ability to there's server glitches while you're in the game, and you can transfer through these glitches and do activities in other time periods in Paris. It's kind of a cool twist, and it reminds you sort of that your simulation, but it does some cool things. Like, for example, you can zip forward a little bit in time and be in Paris right around the time of the World's Fair when the Eiffel Tower is built and things like that. So it's some really cool scenes like that. Really interesting job. It's really creative. They really push the boundaries. I love what they were trying to do with multiplayer. You can jump into someone else's version of Paris and play along with them. And while you're there, they can't do any single player missions while you're there, but much like Crackdown did, while I'm in someone else's version of Paris, I still see all the synchronization points I haven't synchronized myself yet, and all the chests I haven't found and things like all the collectibles. And I can go out and do them in their game and they'll unlock in mine. So playing around the city, doing small random events and things still works and still locks back, and all the experience point you get go back to your character, and you bring your character as you've dressed them yourselves in your game into their game so they can see you and check out what you look like. So it's not like games like Dragon Age where multiplayer is a whole different thing and you level up separately. Your character you've built in Assassin's Creed comes into someone else's game, which is pretty cool. They also came up with this idea for co-op missions And so sprinkled throughout the city of Paris, there are other missions you can play, and they'll say this is a co-op mission for 2 to 4 players, or maybe only 2 players or 3 players. And when these things work, they are awesome. Running across the rooftops with 4 assassins, one of you leaping down and assassinating the guy, the other one swinging over the thing and disconnecting the bell, and the whole thing comes together. It's really, really great. The problem is that a lot of the multiplayer missions are very buggy. There was one really cool one I wish we could have finished, which was a tournament. So some of the thinking is really cool. In addition to just assassinating people, there's one mission that there's a tournament happening in the middle of the city. And, first thing you got to do is steal invitations so you can go. It's kind of like in the classic story Robin Hood, when Robin Hood has to sneak into the tournament and do all those things. So you got to kind of sneak in, steal the thing. And then there's an early event with parkour, and all of you guys are parkour through the course, which is really cool. And then there's like a big fight. But unfortunately, just sort of realized my daughter said bugged out, and you couldn't do anything after a certain point. A lot of times that happens to the games where there's another part where you're actually escorting the folks behind the bread riots during the French Revolution, and as you're doing this, all of a sudden they'll stop walking and it locks right up. So it's really unfortunate because this could have been one of the best games currently available, if not the best game currently available on the next-gen platforms designed for next-gen, and really had it all. Really good multiplayer. As it stands now, it's a good game. And if you like Assassin's Creed, I would highly recommend checking it out. The single-player campaign for me has gone really, really well. I've experienced a couple small bugs, but nothing worse than you occasionally experience in other games, and it doesn't really totally knock out your suspension of disbelief and you're able to continue on. But the multiplayer is where it gets frustrating because it's so close to being awesome. And when a mission does work, it is so sweet. But they don't always work, and you don't really know if they're going to work. And you spend, some of the multiplayer missions take 10, 15 minutes. So you're like 14 minutes in, you're just about to solve it, and something happens, and it's really, really frustrating. So hopefully they'll fix that. I know there were a lot of problems with single player, and I know there were some major patches back in December that resolved it, and it seems to be that way. So if you play it only a single player, you're going to enjoy it. If you're one of those lucky folks who managed to get an Xbox One or a PS4 for Christmas, a lot of them had the Assassin's Creed bundle in there for free. And if you have it sitting around but you have not tried it because you were worried it wasn't very good, try it out. It will definitely impress you with its graphics and looks. They do push the boundaries, but unfortunately that boundary pushing did come at a price, and it's a little more unstable than I would have liked. Still enjoying the heck out of it though, and I would recommend it to any Assassin's Creed fan. That's Assassin's Creed Unity. And that is the app of the app. Thank you for listening to another scintillating edition of App of the App, a segment in which, hey, less of that, more just getting on with the show. Seriously, Wakeland, you are like school in summer. No class.
Hey, welcome back. And now it's time. You've been screaming for it, and we have heard. It is time for another Mulling Mechanics. This time we're going to be talking about dungeon delving.
That's good. See how he did that, Tom? He had that echo
like
effect there. That's a professional podcast that can do echo effects, Tom. I'm just saying.
I'm humbled. I'm humbled to be in that presence.
You know, we aim to please. This is how we roll here.
That's right.
So I love this segment. So we thought having Tom on and talking about Imperial Assault later this episode, we thought it'd be kind of fun to dive into all the different kinds of dungeon delving games and kind of talk about who does different aspects of this stuff well.
Right. Well, Imperial Assault has really reinvigorated the local group with dungeon delving, including your group, which out of the blue, all of a sudden finished its entire Descent campaign so that it could move on to Imperial Assault.
That's right.
It was a logical offshoot of the Imperial Assault dropping so recently.
Now, Tom, you're pretty well known as a dungeon delving fan, right? I mean, Descent has been on your top game list for how long now?
Well, for 10 years.
Right.
It is now 10 years old, if you can believe it.
Yeah, right. So clearly, how much of your gaming collection is made up of dungeon delving games, would you say?
Not as much as you might think. I mean, granted, Descent is a big chunk of my gaming collection, but there's not as many of these out there as people think there are. They hear about a certain number of them, but I would say only a couple come out a year at the most.
Yeah, that's true.
And many of them are pretty bad.
Yep. That's true. I mean, you're right. It's a percentage of overall games made. There's not that many dungeon delving.
And I think that's because role-playing itself does it so well.
Yeah.
That a board game has to overcome that. It has to do something that the role-playing game isn't doing.
Yeah, that's true. Right. But that said, there's a lot of big name games, as you well know, in this area, right? Of course, Descent, Imperial Assault, Arcadia Quest, all recent ones, Super Dungeon Explorer, Wrath of Ashardalon, Mice and Mystics. I mean, the granddaddy's Hero Quest, the Advanced Hero Quest Level 7. What are some of your other ones, Tom? You had a couple bunches.
In no particular order.
In no particular order. I mean, there's been
the order I wrote them in.
Yes. Well, there's also Craig, you love Space Hulk. It's another one. I didn't even think to write that one down.
Space Hulk,
How much that one?
You're going to call that that's a dungeon. That's totally a dungeon delve.
Well, we got to be careful. I think some of these, like you mentioned Arcadia Quest, it's kind of a dungeon delve. It's more of a kick the other team's teeth in.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because I think one of the first differentiators I normally use when someone asks me, can you recommend a good dungeon crawling game? I don't know, Tom, how you feel about this, but the first thing I sort of think about is, do you want a pure co-op game? Do you want a game where there's all of you against one guy? Or do you want everybody for themselves? Because I think of like Arcadia Quest and Tomb as being a couple examples of games where you are actually, there's not really a single overlord or any co-op going on at all, really. Is that, so when someone asks you about dungeon delving, Tom, is that one of the first areas you think about?
Well, first of all, that was nice of you to call Tomb a game. But,
it's not that bad. Come on. It's not.
Yay,
all right,
Tom.
fine.
Tom, you are always welcome here. Your opinion obviously carries so much weight.
Actually, thank you. But actually, Russ, that is not my first question, because I'm not convinced that the pure co-op ones are usually dungeon crawls. I always feel like there should be a DM or GM or I don't know, what do you call the guy in Star Wars now? Is he the Imperial Master? I don't know.
Oh, that's a good call, though. What is that? Do you know, Russ?
They're two-sided, so it's just the Imperial player and the Rebel players. They don't
boring.
Yeah.
I'm calling myself the Imperial Master.
I call him, instead of the Overlord, I call him the Sith Lord. That's what
I'm the Emperor.
Right. So, but definitely, Tom. Let's talk about that. I mean, is really is true versus or true co-op really the dungeon delving experience? It definitely, to your point, it definitely feels to me more like a role-playing experience where there's one player playing the monsters, right?
There are two pure co-ops, I think, that do it well. One is Mice and Mystics, and the other is Super Fantasy. I should say that. I'm sorry. Super Fantasy! Okay.
Yeah.
The Wrath of Ashardalon is co-op, but man, that doesn't feel like a dungeon crawl. It feels like a cooperative game.
Yeah, you're right.
It's fun. I really like it.
Yep.
But it doesn't feel like a dungeon crawl. I don't know why. I think because there's no chests. If there's no loot, it's just not a dungeon crawl.
You know what it is? There's not enough, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think in Wrath of Ashardalon, there's not enough leveling up. Like, I think you need, I think you really need that feeling of like your characters are progressing a lot, and there's not a lot of character progression in the Wrath of Ashardalon and Ravenloft games as much as there is in some of these other games. We can talk
if that's the case, then you need to cut out things like the Catacomb. Not Catacombs. The Space Hulk. And games like that, because those are more like single missions.
Yeah, and I agree. I think without Space Hulk didn't even come to mind. I think it's a good one on here because you definitely have that feeling of exploring a dungeon, even though it's sci-fi. But I don't feel like it's that. It doesn't give me the same feeling exactly because my characters aren't progressing. So that's something I need to have. So we're saying basically, I think we're all kind of saying, Craig, I don't know how do you feel about this? Does the co-op versus one versus does that change the feeling of the game for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I feel is, I'm not too particular about it. I guess if I'm going to delve into a dungeon, I think of it as a dungeon delve. So I'm not a good guy for definitions on this particular topic, I don't think. Because I'm not sure, why is it not, like, why is Wrath of Ashardalon not? Because you're not advancing, I guess. I mean, if your definition of dungeon delve requires that sort of almost role-playing-esque element where you're advancing and there's somebody, you're against more than just the AI, then I guess so. But, I'm not sure why the definition narrows at that point. So I don't know.
Oh, because we're pedantic gamers.
That's right.
Exactly. Okay. Yes, the two of you, yes, as a team, it's almost, yes, absolutely. I agree 100%. It has to have a competitive element. It has to have an advance element. And yes, all of those other games suck.
No, that's not what we say. Look, I love Wrath of Sharon.
I know you didn't say that.
But I think that but I agree with Tom. For some reason, I mean, it definitely feels like a dungeon.
I think I enjoy the games that you're describing as dungeon delves way more than those other games. I think that's absolutely true.
All right, so here's my question. What's the first dungeon delve?
Oh.
What, game? Or
no, RPG. We're not taking Dungeons and Dragons into consideration here. What board game is the first dungeon delve? I don't know, but how about I'll narrow it down. On the list that we wrote here, which of these is the oldest?
Hero Quest.
That's a good guess. Good guess. But it's actually Dungeon.
Oh, Dungeon, yes. I missed. You're right. Dungeon's older. Yep.
Have you ever played Dungeon?
No.
I have, yes. Yep. I have the newer copy.
It's about the simplest dungeon quest you can get.
It's really dirt simple, yeah.
You're running through this dungeon. You flip cards over. There's a monster. You roll dice. You fight him and you beat him. You get gold. And you have to decide when you're going to go back home or if you're going to keep fighting. And there's different colored cards which show how powerful the monsters are. And that's it. They reprinted it a few years ago. But it's about as basic as you can get.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at 1975 was the original.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago.
They just reissued it not too long ago. They reprinted it, and I got one of those versions somehow. I can't forget how I did it.
No, it looks like the 1992, they reprinted Classic Dungeon.
No, they've done it more recent than that.
No, I know. I'm saying they reprinted it as Classic Dungeon, and then they just did Dungeon 2012, and they did Dungeon 2014.
So does Dungeon in the title work? Like, does Dungeon Twister count for one of these games?
No, Dungeon Twister is a straight person versus person. There's no delving. It's more of like football.
Yeah.
Type. It's more of a sports game in a sense because you're fighting the other person.
So I think what we're saying is you need to have exploration. Is that what we're saying? Do we need to have and we need to have leveling.
Yeah.
And
a sense of adventure.
And does the co-op versus team versus anything matter at all, or can it be if it has those four things, does it matter if it's co-op or not?
Actually, I'm going to argue with your leveling. I don't think you need to level as long as there's story progression.
Okay, some kind of
Mice
progression.
and Mystics, there's a little bit of leveling, and Omega Protocol, there's the tiniest bit of leveling.
Yeah.
But it's more about story progression.
That's
Omega Protocol, you're going deeper and deeper. You're really stupid, actually, just going into this place you're going into, but it gets harder and harder.
It does, but your characters do get a little more powerful as they go, but not a lot, right? It's not some of the games you feel more of that than others. Okay, I'm with you. So, what do we think about co-op versus team versus?
Versus?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking like Arcadia
versus
Quest.
The card game's okay, but
yeah. Well, I'm thinking like Arcadia Quest. I actually really like Arcadia Quest a lot, and I know Tom, you really enjoy Arcadia Quest too.
I love it.
It's a fantastic game. And for those who haven't played it, it
like
is
me.
You're right. It is basically each of you control a guild of 3 heroes, and you are fighting. You're all competing to solve a quest challenge each sort of scenario. But typically, you're killing monsters that are controlled by the game, so the other players don't control them. And you are trying to achieve a little objective, like find a certain token on the board, or kill a certain number of monsters before someone else does, or kill other players. And because of this, it's very your characters do this. It's all card driven, so there's character advancing. You're actually in a town, not in a dungeon technically, but it's still got that little exploring and finding things. I don't know, Tom. Do you feel? But you seem to indicate Arcadia Quest felt to you more like a board game and less of a dungeon crawl thing.
Eric Lang, who designed it, he calls the monsters exploding bags of loot or walking bags of loot because that's really what they are. You're never really worried about the other monsters. Yeah. You're thinking, can I beat him? But you don't worry like, oh, he's going to get me. Instead, you're worried about the other players.
Right.
And I love that, but it's not a dungeon crawl. Okay. It doesn't feel like one, I don't think, at all.
So I think we're saying that for us, or in general,
it doesn't look like one.
It doesn't. It feels like Tomb done right to me. It's what Tomb wanted to be, just done much better, with better components and much better execution on
well, low bar there, but okay.
Wow. No love for Tomb in this show.
No,
all right.
None. Well, there's a little on your end. Of the
I
table.
liked
That's
Tomb.
About it.
All right, fine.
I hated Tomb. Tomb almost ended my marriage.
I'm sorry, that should be funny, but
no, it's true.
It'd be funny if it wasn't true.
And I do see the humor in it.
But I think I would agree with, I think where you're both heading is that the one player as Overlord versus the rest of the table as cooperative heroes, to me, Mystics might be the exception that proves the rule. It does a fantastic job of that feeling without a player playing the monsters, but for the most part, most of these games really shine and feel like a quick role-playing session with one player as the monsters, the rest of the players as heroes. Is that?
Well, I'm going to put out another shout-out again for Super Fantasy. If you ever get a chance to play that one, it's kind of a more silly, the monsters and everything are more silly, but they spawn properly, and it works really well as a pure co-op game.
Okay. I'll check that one out. I've not tried Super Fantasy. That sounds good. Cool. All right. So we talked about co-op versus players. And we've mentioned a lot you have to level up. So let's talk a little about how some of these different games handling leveling up or sort of progression, if you will, and which ones we like, how they do it best. So I don't know, Tom, what is your, looking at our list of games here and some of the games you played, what do you think, which game do you think handles, or what kinds of hero advancement do you like to see the most?
Well, my favorite of all of them, of course, is Descent. And I'm going to say second edition because I'm at the point now where I really feel like Descent and Descent 2 are very different games. Mm-hmm. They have Descent added that whole expansion, the campaign expansion, which they then pretty much copied into Descent 2.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I like it a lot. It lets you progress slowly. Mm-hmm. I didn't like the leveling in Descent 1. You started at the beginning of the dungeon, you walked in and you're tripping over your rusty sword.
Right.
And when you got to the last room, you whisper and the monster falls down before you.
Oh, it was too quick.
Demigod, I bow before you.
Right.
But in Descent 2, it progresses slowly, but it gives you just enough that you're like, ooh, I'm a little better than I was before, which is really how good RPGs are.
Right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed. And it handles it with Descent 2 really does it with two different deck-driven components, right? One is a deck of hero abilities, and then, of course, you have the treasure deck, which lets you get more, better gear, right? So you're equipping better equipment, and you're also leveling your character up. In Descent 2, they do it with just more abilities. In Descent 1, it actually felt a little more like D&D in some ways because you were actually leveling, adding more dice to core stats, right? Which was closer to an RPG, but it also added levels of complexity and tracking that got a little hairy. But
I didn't mind that, but the leveling up at Descent 2 where they had specific professions and they leveled up differently made them so different and fun.
It really did. And it actually blew out the hero options now. So you're picking a hero and then his class sort of, which is kind of cool, or his specialization, which was really a neat way to go. So yeah, I really liked how they did that too. What about games like, like Super Dungeon Explorer is pretty straightforward. It just does equipment, right? I think it's pretty much equipment.
Yeah, but see, I guess you should think of the leveling up. How does it do? Does it take place over campaign? Yeah. That's how Descent does it. Imperial Assault does it. And Hero Quest, that's how it, the older game did it. Mm-hmm. Most of these, though, it takes place sometimes in one scenario. That's what happens in Super Dungeon Explorer.
Exactly. One short session. I mean, you have a couple exactly right. And that's where I think Arcadia Quest, even though it's competitive, does have that because you have a linked campaign system in there, and your guys do get better with cards. So I like that element of it a lot. So I think I like these games where I think most of them you have some sort of player mat or a base sort of thing, and then it tracks what you're carrying. And I think the games where you actually have to have slots. So you think of Super Dungeon Explorer, you have to have them. There's different slots around your left and right side, and your head and your feet. And then if you think about Descent, where you have one-handed or two-handed weapons, it just gives you that feeling of like actually equipping a character, which gives you more of that sort of RPG feel, which I really like. What about how they handle the leveling up, if you will, of the Overlord or of the player who gets to be the monsters? What do you like
that?
About
That almost never happens. It's usually just, hey, here's a harder monster. Because, a good Overlord doesn't waste his good monsters in level 1.
Right.
You just get more of them and bigger ones, and if all else fails, give them 5 more hit points. Mm-hmm. But I think Descent and Imperial Assault are the only two I know of that let the bad guy level up, aren't they?
Well, Omega Protocol does it where as the missions get harder, the Overlord, if you will, gets more powers. So that little puzzle you set in front of the Overlord where he's got those little spots where he can spend his...
That's true, and I'm still convinced that may be the best Overlord system ever.
It is,
at this point.
I think it's so good that Fantasy Flight copied it Because if you think about what happened with the agents in Descent 2, what they did was when you got the new agent decks, you left those face up in front of you. They were like permanent powers you'd spend fatigue threat on, right, to use them. And now in Imperial Assault, your powers are again face up all the time. And which reminds me very much, and I'd never seen that mechanic really used in a dungeon crawling game until level 7 Omega Protocol, where you had these sort of set of powers and you were just using. What I love about how level 7 does it is, as the heroes use their abilities, they're giving power tokens essentially in the form of adrenaline to the Overlord, who then he can spend. So the more heroes press their luck and do their stuff, the more energy they're given to the Overlord, which I just love that mechanic. It's kind of like, this is not a dungeon crawling game, but Stronghold has that mechanic where the more time the attackers spend building things up, it gives more time to the defenders. Mm-hmm. And I like that idea where you're by doing more yourself, you're giving your opponent more power. Omega Protocol does it pretty well, and Descent 2 started doing it a little bit with the way the threat works. So when the Overlord spends his threat, it goes to the heroes. And now in Imperial Assault, threat works sort of in a similar way. So I really like that element of it, and but you're right, Tom. Descent really did a cool job with it, where you, most of these games you just get more cool monsters as you go higher and higher levels. There's more stuff, but in Descent, where you're building your decks and you actually have themed, in Descent and Imperial Assault, Descent 2, where you have sort of these themes for your deck, so you can build sort of the intrigue, what do they call it, the intrigue deck, and there's
there's a lot of decks.
Aggression deck. Yeah, a lot of different ways you can do it.
The only problem with the Descent scenarios, I'm like, ooh, a new deck. Okay, but I'm already in the middle of a campaign. I can't use this deck, so thanks a lot, Fantasy Flight. I have to restart the campaign now.
That's one of my biggest beefs with the agents in Descent 2, is you're only allowed to pick one agent per campaign, and you're stuck with that same agent the entire campaign.
Oh, I've house ruled that.
It seems like they've fixed it in Imperial Assault. So Imperial Assault, it looks like, now they haven't done a lot of expansions yet, but I'm going to guess that because you can use threat to bring more guys in, if you could just put and because there's those open groups where you can pick guys into the open group, it seems to me you could just bring in these new guys into your campaign, which would be really cool. So you have to wait for a new campaign to bring in some new.
Well, also because all of the expansions are present in the original box as tokens.
Right.
So those models are sort of built into what's not built into the campaign are those, and I think this is what Tom was talking about, those special mission cards or ability cards that come with every one of those ally packs that you're supposed to have at the beginning to choose from, and you didn't have them to choose from. Like the Darth Vader one, which you do have, luckily. You've got the Darth Vader and the Luke Skywalker. The Darth Vader mission is awesome, but you wouldn't have had access to that, if it didn't come in the box originally.
Right.
So what other cool things, like what cool mission does IG-88 have that you're not going to be able to, shuffle in there, things like that?
Every mission he's on.
It's a cool mission. So cool. So we like, so it sounds like Descent does the best job, or in level 7 to a lesser extent, with Overlord leveling, and we like hero leveling. I like, I think the hero leveling with the cards is pretty much the way to go, most of this stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons that Space Hulk doesn't jump out as me as a dungeon crawler, because there's none. There's none, except for that in later missions you get more cool Marines. It's almost like the heroes level the way most monsters level for Overlords. That is, you just this mission you got more cool stuff.
Yeah, and even then, not that much. I mean, you're just your heavy weapon or your librarian. Your access. And now there's all kinds of other stuff. There's campaigns that people have come up with and stuff like that. But that's mostly nostalgia, I think.
But we should mention that there is a lot of homebrew stuff out there. Before Descent came out, there really wasn't anything. There was Hero Quest, and for a while Hero Quest, and even now goes for obscene prices on everywhere. And so you buy Hero Quest, and it's just a very simple game. So a lot of people spend a lot of time adding to it, and then they made Advanced Hero Quest. But I don't know if you guys remember Mage Knight, the collectible miniatures game from WizKids. One.
Yep.
They made Mage Knight Dungeons. Mm-hmm. And I was really excited when I was like, oh, it's going to be like Hero Quest with Mage Knight figures. And it wasn't really.
Yeah.
But some people on the internet worked on some rules, and I worked on them too, where we made our own version of it where you could go through as a dungeon crawl with those figures. And so sometimes that sort of thing can happen. We used to play a sort of dungeon crawl with some of the D20 Dungeons and Dragons and or the Star Wars D20 stuff that Wizards came out with.
Cool. Yeah, those are fantastic games. Even though the rules are meh, it was just go getting the components. And I definitely made my share of house rules for Hero Quest and Advanced Hero Quest. So we talked a little bit about how dungeon delving had to have an exploration component to it. Let's talk about this because this is an area where I think they get a little weak a little bit. So even Descent 1 was better about this than Descent 2. So in Descent 1, the quest book was only meant to be read by the Overlord, right? And it was sort of a mystery. And then if you look at games like Wrath of Ashardalon, where the dungeon sort of builds as you go and you don't really know what's going to be around the corner next. But then in Descent 2, it's sort of like, hey, it's perfect knowledge for everybody. This scenario is a tactical battle. So everybody gets to read through it in advance. Everybody knows what's around every corner. Everybody gets to know all the special rules. And there's not really any mystery. It's more of a, it's like a tactical combat game, which is cool, just different. But then if you look at Imperial Assault, it's back to only the Sith Lord, if you will, the bad guy, gets to read through the scenario, and the rebel players get no knowledge of what's going on, which works great for your first playthrough at least.
Right.
What do you guys think about how important the exploration component of this is to feeling like a good dungeon?
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say that I would say that's central to me. That's what it's got to be all about, really. Go ahead, Tom. You were going to say it better than I was.
No, I was going to say I don't want to steal too much thunder from when we talk about Imperial Assault, but Imperial Assault might do that better than anyone else. They really have some cool surprises.
Yeah.
Where you feel like the blast doors open and out steps,
right.
Right. a royal guard, and it's just wow. Yeah. Descent 2, I agree with you, but for me, and I don't know if you were planning on talking about this later, I always play the Overlord in any possible game I can.
Me
I love
too.
it.
I'm the same way.
But I guess we can't play together then. But two Overlords go at it.
But I can play with both of you.
But I always feel that it's my job to make the game fun for everyone else. I've never tried to win, except against some jerky players who annoyed me. But for the most part, I'm just trying to make everyone have a fun time. So with Ascent 2, I don't actually tell them everything. I just tell them enough that I think they're able to get through it so that I can do some little cool surprises for them.
Yeah. No, we generally play that way, and I'd love to claim that I never try to win because that way my record wouldn't look so bad. But we play sort of by the rules and what in that rate because my heroes like to be competitive with it. But you definitely get house rule, and generally speaking, we kind of leave it a little bit surprisey for them. Like they don't read the fluff or anything, and I do a dramatic reading of Splig yet again getting defeated. But that
dude can't win.
He can't win for losing. But yeah, I do like the mystery of it more, and I like the games where either the dungeon sort of builds as you go. If you remember Descent 1, like you actually aren't supposed to build the dungeon out beyond the door until it opens, that kind of thing, which I thought was pretty cool. And I like, but depending how you do it, I guess if you're going for the feel, it doesn't really bother me too much if it's super tactical. Like Omega Protocol is interesting how they handle it, right? Like the dungeon is laid out on the table, but then certain elements of it, like the objective tokens, are distributed randomly, so you really don't know if it's the control panel in room 1 or the control panel in room 2 that you need to get to, and the monsters sort of are always in the same spot. So some parts, there's some replayability there I kind of like, because I think the biggest challenge you have with static dungeons, no matter how even with the Imperial Assault rule where you don't get to see it the first time, after one or two plays, you're gonna kind of know the layout and you're gonna know all the surprises, right? So I don't know how you deal with that. It doesn't seem like my biggest ding against Imperial Assault is that I don't know that except for the open monster groups, I'm not really sure how much variability in replay there's gonna necessarily be, except for the different heroes and different notes.
He says this. I can't believe you say stuff like that. You're going to buy every expansion.
Oh, no.
And you're never going to play the same one twice.
No.
What are you talking about?
Well, no, and the way they solve this is the Fantasy Flight way, which is A, release a gajillion expansions, and B, it's card-driven campaigns in Imperial Assault. So the missions you do get dealt are different. This is kind of clever how they did this. So the way Imperial
You're
Assault...
going to have to cut out whole sections of this and put it in the Imperial Assault review.
No, we'll get in details over there, but basically it's like mission, fixed mission, and then random mission, fixed mission, random mission. So you don't really, it's not a fixed set like it is there's a branching structure in Descent 2, but eventually if you play the same campaign, you're going to hit all the missions. Whereas Omega Protocol and some other games, there's variability in the mission setup itself, right? So even though you play the exact same title mission, it's not always going to be quite the same every time. So I guess there's different ways to handle it. I kind of like, who am I kidding? I like them all. I really like the stories in Imperial Assault. So I think the penalty you get hit by for the slight ding in replayability is more than made up for in the really cool storytelling and mission, advanced mission options you get and more complex mission design you can pull off in a fixed mission like the ones in Imperial Assault. So that's my feeling on it. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, no, I just remembered what Tom said about cutting out sections and having to move it into the thing. So yes, I agree with what you just said.
We will defer to the granddaddy of podcasting on.
No, I'm just saying we're just trying to.
Right. We don't want to cover the same ground twice.
You're right.
But I will say that mission is critical in these games, and if it's a well balanced mission that keeps everybody on their toes, it's a lot more fun than a walkover in either direction.
That's true.
Now you've been talking a lot about Descent and such. Have you played Shadows of Brimstone?
Only once, but I liked it. Do you like it, Tom?
I have not played it because I was infuriated when I found out I had to put the miniatures together.
Yeah, there's some assembly required. Yeah.
And that was the board gamer reaction that we were noting when it came out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't even have any idea. I looked at the cover. I heard it was good. I opened it up and saw all these sprues. And I was like, sprues? I didn't.
What?
What's this? It's been years since I've done these things.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But so you've played it. Tell me where it lands on these things. Is there level progression? Is there story in it?
There's enough. It didn't blow me away though, I'll be honest. So I liked it, but it didn't capture me, and I'm not really sure why. It just didn't quite grab me all the way in. So I don't know if it's just the art direction or what, but it didn't pull me right in all the way.
The other big one that came out last year was Myth. Have you played that one?
I've watched it played very carefully, and I couldn't get sucked into that one either. Have you tried it, Tom?
I did, and I think it's an excellent game, although the rule book probably qualifies for it's one of the worst ones ever. And they left it too free form, really.
Yeah.
But think of it more as a grown-up version of Super Dungeon Explorer.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Although it has probably some of the coolest level progression. Essentially, you get a deck of cards, and you're drawing cards from this deck, and it has all kinds of special abilities you can do, and you will slowly change that deck of cards. It will slowly add new cards to it as time goes by. So eventually you've replaced the whole original deck, and then you start replacing that deck.
So it's kind of like leveling up through deck building.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty cool idea. I'm just thinking that the game itself has lost its momentum and will not see all that final stuff.
Yeah, it didn't get good traction. We had a lot of people in our local gaming group who backed it and got all excited about it, and then when it came out, there was some disappointment around it a little bit, I think.
Well, didn't it come out with like a totally wrong, like the rule book was completely wrong, or there was something really issues. Bad about
there were some
the initial
issues,
execution that had to be completely fixed.
So
it just wasn't really
very good.
Easy to figure out from the rules. No, the game is fine. It's just
okay.
They didn't know how to write.
That's
the
what
rules.
it was. The rules were really poorly written. That's what it was.
So,
which is a shame.
It is a shame. It is a shame because I think it had potential. So, well, let's talk about this a little bit. So, we talked about perfect knowledge, and I think Craig, you talked about storytelling, and how important is a storytelling to these games? I mean, if you look at a game like Super Dungeon Explorer, which is a lot of fun, and I love the art direction and the silly, wacky, chibi look of it, and the gameplay mechanics are fast and furious, but there's zero story in Super Dungeon Explorer. You run in and you kill stuff. How important is story in these games to really get you engaged and really feel like you're doing a dungeon delve?
I think the story is pretty strong in Descent and Descent 2 and in Imperial Assault. I think Level 7 has some, even if the story's not there, it feels like a story. All of a sudden the event opens up and some aliens come out of it.
Yeah.
And, it's hard not to keep people from quoting aliens.
Right.
Why would you even try, really? Come on.
You're right.
Everybody's
I'm
got
a
their
fun killer.
You are.
Well, that's a good point, Tom. Is it that there needs to be a narrative around each mission, or is it as long as the game itself feels like a story happened, then...
The second one for me. You don't have... like Mice and Mystics works because they wrote such amazing stories in it.
Right.
I mean, the stories are fantastic, but that's probably the only one. You know, some of the ones I start reading them and then I stop because I'm embarrassed about what I'm reading. So I'll make stuff up, you know, like I'm not reading that. It sounds like Cobra Commander wrote it.
Again, what's wrong with that?
There's the title. All right. It sounds like Cobra Commander. Right? Tune in this week and hear Tom say, sounds like Cobra Commander. Right? Well, I agree with you actually on that. I think that as long as you feel like there was a great story, I think Descent 2, I mean, there is a story. Descent 1's campaign was sort of interesting because you had that talk about playing and making a story because you're on a map. You know, if you think about the metagame in Descent 2 of the campaign mechanics where you're going around a map and you're moving from city to city, almost like a giant Dungeons and Dragons campaign. And then remember back when we were that town and you learned how to cast Fireball and then went into the dungeon and fought that, you know, so there's a story that kind of builds up that way. And then of course they have the stories in the missions now, but I like Descent 2's. You feel like there's a story because it seemed like in the last campaign I played with my party, we played in the one with the, I can't remember the expansion now, the name of the expansion, the one with the spider on the cover. The giant spider. What's the name of that expansion? I can't remember. Anyway,
it's Giant Spider expansion. I think it's Narrow Hall or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And in that one, whatever path they ended up choosing, they kept running into Splig like over and over again. It was hilarious. So Splig became sort of this recurring character, and we made up all these jokes about him. And of course, we painted the figure up instantly, and he sort of became a thing. And so characters started to learn the villains, and they, you know, that, oh, it's him again. And so you kind of feel like that. And they also managed to replicate an Imperial Assault. I mean, when there's one mission where the Empire attacks a base the rebels are trying to defend, and when Vader shows up, you get that image right out of, you know, A New Hope when the attacker, they're invading the Corvette, and all of a sudden Vader walks through the doors. You know, you just have that storytelling moment. So I think there's some of the games really do capture that. And I think you're right too, Tom, with level 7, where there's a basic story arc of you're progressing through this, you know, alien infested facility, but you do have those moments of like, oh, Jenkins is down, someone drag him back to the, you know, that kind of stuff happens. So it's, I think as long as the game feels like there's a story happening, you're in pretty good shape.
I think that the story is key and why I really enjoy these kind of games. And when you're doing it and there really isn't a story, I feel like you start to check out because the mechanics can only bring the mechanics, and even if there's some tension, can only bring you so far. I think it's the story that really gets you involved in and you know and concerned about what's going on.
So can the events in the game tell the story for you, Craig, or do you really need
it absolutely
like some narrative around it?
I mean, like the level 7, as things develop and expand for you and things start dropping down, I mean, you're right in the middle of, you want some too, you know, and that's all the story you need for that moment.
Right.
But I mean, I think Imperial Assault does a great job, and enough said about that.
Space Hulk does it that way too. If you think about it for a minute, Space Hulk does a good sense of the drama with the blips, and all of a sudden they're coming from the left.
But the story's the same every time.
That's true. Yeah,
that's the story's cool, and that's why the game might get played once a year. I think it looks cool. The mechanics are pretty neat and pretty straightforward, and it's cool to have that tension and that dun 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 dun, you know, thing going. But there's nothing to draw you back to that experience because it's going to be pretty much the same experience on a different map with different, with different material every time.
So is the problem Space Hulk has that it's all the time dark corridors with specific kinds of aliens, where as opposed to like, if you think about a game like, Imperial Assault or Mice and Mystics or Super Dungeon, it's one time you're fighting dragons in a dungeon, the next, now you're outdoors fighting, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you think every time that an expansion comes out for one of those games, it's like a whole new game. Now you're fighting these kinds of monsters, and the story, you know, especially the way Fantasy Flight does it, everything comes with a little story, so you know the background of what's going on. And Mice and Mystics, same thing, and so. Yeah, so I mean the whole thing, like when you might play against the, you know, Splig forever, and then you're like, oh, by the time you're done, maybe you're like, yeah, I'm glad we killed that guy. And, you know, but then next time,
Russ he comes back with one eye and
that's right.
There you go. Yeah, and a hook for a hand and the ability to breathe underwater. But anyway, moving on.
I feel bad for listeners at this point. If you've been playing a drinking game every time Russ says Imperial Assault, you are stone dead.
That's
drunk.
right.
You're not listening anymore.
Speaking of Imperial Assault, when we talk about storytelling, I think that kind of dovetails into the idea of campaign options and how important is a interlocking campaign to each of your games. Does it really matter to these systems? I mean, some of these games don't really have a campaign element. If you think about Super Dungeon Explorer, doesn't have really that. Some of the games can be played either way. Most of them, though, have some form to interlock. Like Ravenloft had nothing. Wrath of Ashardalon added a very light campaign touch to that series. How important is the ability to have a campaign to these games, and how important is it to the story?
Well, Hero Quest is the first one to do it, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
For a board game. And when I was a kid, I played that, and I was just enthralled by that. That you could take something from one. I hadn't played RPGs at the time. Mm-hmm. So this was my first experience with that, and I still like it to this day. I like that idea. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it can be frustrating if you have people who aren't able to commit to come every time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've done a couple things to mitigate that. One, I just run the same campaign, and here's your guy. This is who you have. This is his powers at this point in time. Or most of the newer ones, like Level 7 Omega Protocol, for example, you can play pretty much any mission in the book out of order, and you'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And even Descent, you can pull out several of the missions and just play them.
Yeah. And I think it works. I like the option, though. Craig, what do you think? Does the campaign element really critical to you to really be interested in? I mean, let's put it this way. If you're looking at buying a new one of these things, does the fact that it can or cannot have a campaign element sway you one way or the other to buying one of these games?
It would be a tiebreaker, I think.
Okay.
I mean, I can imagine if you've got, like, if Imperial Assault, as an example, just because I love Star Wars, didn't have a campaign element, would I have bought it? Yes. Mm. And it would have had a cool one-off sort of, you'd be playing one-off games and it'd be neat, and maybe there'd be missions and that'd be cool. The fact that it has the campaign element is awesome to me because that really just sucks me in. And now I can't tell you how invested I am in our Imperial Assault campaign that we're in right now. And I died the last time we played, and I was like, no, I haven't died yet, and of course, even when you die, you're only, you're out of action, your buddies drag you away and you're okay again later on. But, I enjoy it more. At the same time, there's a lot more pressure, right? Because now you've got a campaign, and you've, just like Tom is saying, like, what if somebody doesn't show up? And we're having that issue with our group, and with just this last week, somebody got sick. But we're like 3 deep on the bench as far as this campaign group is
the line
concerned.
waiting to play.
So, exactly. So somebody's sick, and somebody else is like, I'm there. Where are you? What do I need? I'll bring the food. There's bribery going on. It's everything. And so I think he might have even poisoned Ian. I think Andy may have poisoned Ian so that he could take his spot.
Nice.
But so yeah, I could see it too. I'm watching my back.
That's because you've got a fully painted set now, Craig. So there's like Machiavellian machinations going on.
That's right. And not to be confused now I was called on this by Matt today, so I'm going to bring it up just in case I forgot it in achievements. But Matt painted all of the heroes that we were playing.
Okay.
So I did paint everything in eventually, but on the very first day he is painting them to a much higher standard than I'm painting. I mean, they're beautiful, like Golden Demon. They would not be ashamed to be in the Golden Demon case, or the Crystal Brush, as the case may be. Like, really beautiful jobs on these models. So we have everything. We've got the 3D terminals now. We've got doors. We've got the whole thing blinged out. So yes, so that may be another reason. Yeah, see?
Shut up.
Oh, you know what though? You gotta. Well, never mind.
Hey.
I don't even know what I was going to say.
Where are we going with that?
I have no idea where that was going.
Back to what Russ was saying about the campaign.
Yes.
Though.
Let's go back to actual points.
It's pretty easy for me to tell which one I like better because I played Descent before they added the campaign, and when I added the campaign, Descent went from a game I liked a lot to one of my favorites.
Yeah,
that expansion just blew my mind at how much game they packed in one box.
It did,
and how that completely changed the game.
Along those lines, Tom, I remember playing Descent when it first came out. Russ had it, I think, and we were like, yeah, let's play it. And I think we even played it over at Joe's. That's how long ago it was. And I was like, God, this game takes forever. This sucks. And I was like, I never wanted to play it again. That was way before the campaign. That was just like, let's just play the first mission out of the box. And it was like taking forever and ugh.
Well, that was one of the categories I wanted to cover. And I think, Tom, to your point, that initial campaign set for Descent 1 that came out fixed, in my mind, 2 big problems with Descent that later most of these other games have tried to avoid. And one of them was there was no campaign, and it fixed the problem where, to your point earlier, Tom, that you just felt like it was this weird leveling thing where your guy walked into the dungeon as a noob and all of a sudden was like a level 10 paladin at the end of 4 rooms, which took 8 hours to play, by the way, to get you 4 rooms. But the campaign thing took the same mechanics of the game, all of a sudden made it take multiple sessions to level up, but each dungeon was only roughly an hour play cycle. So it made it, in a way, it shortened the game session length, but added this ability to play almost indefinitely. It'd take you literally a year if you played once a week or twice a week to get through an entire campaign. I know this because we did this, but I thought it was a fantastic,
the lackluster ending to the campain.
Yes, unfortunately, the finales were always lackluster in Descent 1 and Descent 2. They kind of fixed it, but
Descent 2, yeah.
Yeah, Descent 2. We had pretty good finale.
I thought you meant the Sea of Blood.
No, Sea of Blood was the worst. I killed my whole party in like 30 seconds. But Descent 2, the finales are pretty engaging, and while I've still lost them, it's been a lot more fun. But yeah, I think they really fixed that, and I think the campaign. I'm with you guys. I think the campaign is good. What do you guys think about game length for these things? I mean, is there a need I think there's definitely the bite-sized chunks, and it affects me now when I look at them. But what do you think, Tom, about the game? Because some of these games go really long.
Yeah, I'm just past that point in my life where I want to play games that long.
Yeah.
I remember playing Descent the first time it came out. I happened to be in Malaysia at the time, and so I got to play like one of the first copies because it got there before America. And we're like, let's do it. Set it up. We're playing it right now. I don't care. We were in the middle of this convention, and we started at noon, and at 8, we finished. And I was like, wow, that was really fun, but wow, that was really long. That's okay. We can do it again sometime. Now I would be like, oh man, that's really long.
Right.
I don't mind playing 20 hours. Just let's break it up into chunks. Mm-hmm. And I like that they've done that with most of these games. And unfortunately, some Kickstarters are like, oh no, we need those really long games back. Guess what, guys? No, we don't.
No, we don't. It's better. I like this. This is the way to do really long games. And I'd be interested to see if other games that weren't dungeon delving could be, if you think about Risk Legacy tried this a little bit, right? Where, although those games are still pretty long, but they've chunked up, they've sort of turned a Risk game into a campaign system, if you will, right? With multiple games sort of add together. And I'd love to see more games try this, where if you had a game like Twilight Imperium, but instead of taking 20 hours to play Twilight Imperium, you could somehow play it in bite-sized chunks with the same epic feeling, but you could play for 1 or 2 hours, and then somehow the game could be stored and then played again. I don't know how you do that with TI, but I feel like there's someone out there that's really, really much smarter than me could probably figure that out. Or a game, or make a new game that gives you that feel that could be chunked up. Because I think that's really the biggest lesson from these dungeon crawlers. If I could,
I think so. That's happening.
Yeah, we'll give it some examples.
Risk Legacy.
Yeah, Risk Legacy is. Yeah, that was.
And I mean, right now Rob W is doing that with Seafall.
Yes,
and then we're going to see Pandemic Legacy.
Yeah.
I'm predicting we're going to see in the future.
So you're thinking
more of it.
So the legacy concept is sort of this concept taken to other types of games, which is good.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Now the only trouble with Legacy, and I don't know if Seafall is going to do this. You probably know more. I'm sure you know about that I do, but Legacy was a once per copy sort of situation, right? Once you've done Risk Legacy, once you've sort of played through the quote-unquote campaign because you've permanently altered your system, right? So you'd have to buy it. Not that it's that expensive. You'd buy another copy to do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't look at it that way. It was like a never-ending thing.
All right.
Kind of like a role-playing game. You don't start the same characters over again.
That's true.
In the same thing. You just keep playing them somewhere else. And I think that's how I felt with that game.
All right. And my last thing I want to talk about, we're going along here, but good stuff. So one thing almost all these games have in common, and probably the reason Tomb didn't make the list, because its sparkling mechanics are awesome, is components. So I think just about every single one of these games we named, if you look about Hero Quest and Advanced Hero Quest and Space Hulk and Descent and Wrath of Ashardalon and Level 7 and Mice and Mystics, all these games, have miniatures. They have really high quality components. Is that essential for these games to really have those high quality components for us to really be drawn into them?
It's not essential, I guess, for the game to be good, but I mentioned Super Fantasy, and you guys haven't heard of it. I'm sorry.
No.
Super Fantasy.
Thank you.
And you haven't heard of it, but that's because it has stand-up counters. And I think that's a main thing about that game. It's great. It's fun, but it doesn't have the component quality that other games do, and so I think it's going to fall behind. Component quality is not alone good enough to save a game, but we're at the point now where if I look at a game and the components look chintzy and stuff, I'm going to walk right by it.
Yeah.
And that's, again, I hate to keep bagging on Flying Frog, but again, that's what annoyed me about Shadows of Brimstone is, I have to cut these models off of the sprues and put them together. And that might be old hat for miniature gamers, but we now know that you can actually put these things in a bag already done, Cool Mini or not. And
absolutely.
And Fantasy Flight other companies are doing this with these wonderfully detailed miniatures.
Yep. Agreed. You're exactly right, Tom. And I think I do think that we're, for better or worse, and I say worse because for small, obviously, folks who have great ideas and want to try it out, it's true. I hate to, go past the game because its components aren't awesome. But I come from the miniature gaming background, so I'm always drawn to cool miniatures.
Visuals are
the visual, right? And so. And then I think you double that with when you get a license like Star Wars, you're like, oh man, I get all those cool looking stormtroopers. And by the way, the game doesn't suck. It's Descent,
Right.
So, but you look at level 7, so Fantasy Flight's sort of proven that they're a board game company that can do miniatures. You get level 7 coming from Privateer Press, who's a miniature company. Super Dungeon Explorers from Cool Mini or Not, who's a miniature company. Space Hulk, those are all from miniature gaming companies. And I think that's part of it. And it's hard to, and I think that's probably why most of those miniature gaming companies go that route, because it's a genre that really attracts people who like miniatures, I guess.
Well, since this podcast is being posted in late 2016, at this point, Bonacor has also started his Kickstarter. Yes. Actually, it's already been fulfilled and sent out of the new what's the game called for Space Cadets?
Space Cadets Dungeon Crawl?
Yeah, we're going to call it that for now. Space Cadets Miniatures.
Yes.
All right. And he's doing miniatures, and I'm going to assume they're good because they better be, or we're going to pan the game.
Right. Bonacor, get on that.
But I mean, we're starting to see this happen more and more. If you put thought into miniatures,
you just gave the poor guy a heart attack. You realize that he's all like worked up now and emailing us as we speak.
Right.
Thanks,
yes, he is.
Tom. Yes.
I've been giving him garbage all day long, but. But seriously, by the time this goes, the campaign is either in full swing or is coming to its end, I'm sure. Right. And but I'm saying that more companies are getting into it because it's possible. This is how I feel about all board games in general, though. I used to be lenient, you're a small company, so your components, aren't as good as Fantasy Flights or whatever. But no more, because everybody has upped their game. Everybody has. So you need to make good components. You need to price it out and do it, because otherwise you're going to fall in a big crowd of really good-looking games.
That's true. And I think Kickstarter enables even the small guy to get – if you've got a crazy good idea, you should be able to present it away in Kickstarter to get the funding to be able to get the talent you need to get those cool miniatures or whatever you need. So I think that's it's still possible to get published in that way, but you've got to go all the way. If you look at I was talking, this is totally off topic now, but Tiny Epic Kingdoms and Tiny Epic Galaxies, those games have nice, clear, easy to understand, cool looking meeple type stuff, so you just need to get at least that far,
That's true. No one's made a dungeon crawler with meeples.
Oh, there's an opportunity there, Tom.
No, there's not. By the way, Stronghold's game is Space Cadets Away Missions.
Oh, that's right. I knew that was coming. I didn't know about that. Is it on Kickstarter yet? Probably not today.
As of this podcast, probably.
So we're recording. Yeah. So we're recording. We happen to be recording with Tom on January 14th, but this will be live probably later in the month
of 2015.
2015. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Tom, for that.
Confusing the whole issue.
So we're going along. We should probably wrap up.
The whole time warp thing is bad enough as it is.
Right. So we're going along. We should probably wrap it up. Thanks, Tom, for chatting with us here for this, hour or so. And we'll be right back after.
And for putting Russ in his place.
That's right.
That's always worth its price of admission right there.
After a few messages from Total Fangirl and Rafe, we'll be back to talk about a detailed review of Imperial Assault, because we haven't said enough.
Been trying to talk about this whole hour.
Right.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, total fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy. And Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hey everyone, this is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can follow me on Twitter at Nicole Wakeland and check out my blog, TotalFangirl.com. This week's shout out is to all of our wonderful supporters over at Patreon. You too can support the show. Head to patreon.com/the D6Generation. So we started watching a new television show with the girls, which is always cool because there are shows that Russ and I like that we can't really watch with the kids yet because they think that it's too scary, or they're just not into it because they're still too young. But Russ found the show called The Librarians. And we started watching the show, and he actually saw it before me, watched 10 minutes, said, I have to have Nicole watch the show because she's going to love it. So he was right. And then we started watching it, and then we said, God, I think the girls really like this. So we've been watching this as a family. And as I record, we are getting our horrible blizzard here on the East Coast. So there's a good chance we'll watch some of it today as we're all trapped inside during the epic blizzard of 2015. But what made the show kind of fun was it's slightly cheesy. Like it makes me think just a little bit of like Xena, and Hercules, you know, where things are a little cheesy, a little fake. You know, they're not quite real. You know, the guy wearing a plastic mask really looks like a guy wearing a plastic mask, so he's not scary. But the show itself is really fun and the sort of witty banter. And we decided the character, the librarian, played by Noah Wyle, he reminds me a lot of David Tennant's Doctor in Doctor Who. And as we were watching it, I thought, you know, this is kind of sort of what I think might be missing from Doctor Who lately. Not all these characters, not this show, not searching for artifacts like this is about, but that sort of slightly crazy, slightly goofy, slightly wonky, knows how to do everything without even having to think about it character that David Tennant was when he played the Doctor. So I found us all watching this, and I'm watching it and wanting to go back and rewatch some old Doctor Who when it was better, I think, than it is right now. I'm not as keen on the more current seasons of the series, but I really enjoyed it, and it's fun for me to see the girls really getting into this because they're totally buying in to the entire thing. And I couldn't help but hope that maybe as Doctor Who goes on, they recapture some of that sort of goofiness. It became so serious and it became so stark and so dark, and the fun is gone a little bit. And it's not the actors and actresses. They're still fantastic. I love Capaldi. He's great. But it's just the scripts. There's no quirkiness to it. Think about how quirky and weird, David Tennant was. That's kind of gone now. But this show captures it. So The Librarians is sort of serving as my pseudo Doctor Who, while Doctor Who isn't out right now. There's no new episodes for months. And that character that the Doctor was, he is no longer. So if you're looking for kind of a fun show that's slightly unbelievable and not scary in the least because the scary beasties are just not realistic enough to be scary, check out The Librarians. I think you guys will really like it.
Hey, welcome back, and now it's time to talk about our friends at Geek Nation Tours.
That's right. When it's time for you to go on a vacation, if you're like a raging geek, there's nothing better than Geek Nation Tours.
You know, there's some great conventions they cover locally here in the United States. For example, they're going to be at TempleCon just a couple of weeks away now.
That's
really,
the
really
closest
close.
They've ever come to us.
I know, which is very exciting. They also, of course, go to Depticon, Craig, which we're all very excited about up in March.
That's like their huge, almost like a flagship trip at this point. They've done this year after year after year with big giant crowds, always super happy. And they're the guys who you can follow to get the best pizza.
Exactly right. And what's awesome is they do take you to the places around town beyond the gaming. That's what's really cool. You get a taste of the city with an eye towards geekdom, which is always fantastic. And the tours beyond that are even more amazing. And like touring, going to the UK to tour Sherlock Holmes locations, which just sounds fantastic to me. I really, really want to do that. But then I can't decide between that and the signature Battlefield series, the Battle of Waterloo.
Oh, how about Middle Earth Tour? That's the one I would do if I had all the money in the world.
Yeah, and then What about geeking out at Essen in Germany? Come on, I want to do that. I mean, so many choices. Which one to do?
World War II, the Britain stands alone. Honestly, a lot of these are sort of bucket list kind of trips.
They really are. They really are.
And you will not be treated any better than you will be treated on these trips. From that introductory dinner where they bring in experts to tell you exactly how to get the most out of whatever it is, whatever the location is that you're vacationing, all the way through to gaming every night and gaming with, I mean, it's gaming nonstop with a bunch of great people who all have similar tastes. And there's really no better way to travel, especially if you want to make gaming part of your vacation.
That's exactly right. So head on over to geeknationtours.com.
Huzzah!
I'm Rafe Hollywood Granger, and this is the Hollywood Minute.
Welcome to another edition of the Hollywood Minute with your host, Rafe Hollywood Granger. You can follow me on my microblog, which is known as Twitter, the D6G Hollywood on Twitter, or my YouTube channel, Rafe Hollywood Granger. And I still have the blog over there at jimmyjango.com, but most of my activity you'll find on the Twitter feed. All right, for today's episode, we're going to do Alien Isolation Part 2, and I'm not sure about the second half of the Hollywood Minute. So, the Alien Isolation. So I'm destined to want to finish this game. It's a long game. Anybody who buys it, if you're happy about length of content, you will be very happy. I'm actually a fan of the shorter games, so like when GameSpot or different reviewers review a game as not being, quote, worth the $60 because it's too short. I actually am a fan of those games. I finish them and I feel satisfied. This one I'm like, oh, come on. I thought it was over. I thought it was over like 3 times. It's still really good though. I'll tell you what, right when I was getting sick of all the alien, it stopped. The game shifted into some other missions. It was still go here, this door's locked, go back here, get the pass key, but what was really cool is it wasn't the alien anymore, and so just when I was getting sick of hiding from the alien, it stopped. It changed it and it had different threats and puzzles, so I thought that was really cool. The scenery is spectacular and the story is pretty cool, so, yeah, I just did not any spoilers here, but I just did a scene towards the end of the game where you go outside, and it was really cool. The cinematics were really cool, so, yeah, I'm still enjoying the game, and I recommend it to anybody, even with the part where the alien gets a little bit boring. Still painting for TempleCon, and was going on a really good clip for a while there, but then had a slowdown, just got tired at night where I couldn't keep going. I'm at the phase now where I am doing the cleanup for the model, so like all the base coats on and stuff, and then when you do the red, the ink splashes all over and gets on the horse and the buckles and things like that. So I just went through and cleaned up all my edges, and it's back through to do some of the most outermost models, portions of the model. I'll paint those. I'm an inside-out painter. I like to paint the inside colors first and then work my way outwards. Other people paint outside in. And let's see, I'm happy with how they're coming along, that's for sure. I actually didn't get into the team tournament. We are the first team on the wait list for TempleCon, so hopefully, I don't wish anybody ill will, but if they're not going to come play, then I'm looking forward to that so I can actually play. And if not, I don't really care. I'll just play, whatever they call the endless battles where you just keep playing. I forget the official name of that. What else? Let's see, I've been sick forever. You might even hear it in my voice still. I think I'm on the tail end of that, getting better there. And looking forward to getting back to some Dragon Age once I'm done playing with the Alien Isolation. So, yeah, I really think that's it. It was fun appearing on the episode last week with the predictions, and due to my illness, I haven't really been out and doing anything much. We did have a nice, I did get to play D&D, which was fun. I was exhausted at the end of it, but, yeah, we had a good time. We did the caverns, and I think I talked about that in the show. That's right, you did hear about that. And so I'm reading the next section, and I really, really, really cannot recommend enough the new D&D books. Reading right now Hoard of the Dragon Queen. That supplement is excellent. It's excellent for any GM who wants to just have source materials or even follow it by the letter. I'm just so amazed about how those designers have thought of everything. I've literally not had to tweak anything in the missions, and the people are having a blast, and I'm having a blast running it. So I cannot recommend that enough. I've got the new DM's guide to pour through. I'm looking forward to that. And, yeah, I think that's it. All right. Happy gaming. Until next time.
This is the Dice Tower Network at dicetowernetwork.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back. And now it's time to talk about something that we've been trying hard not to talk about for about 2 hours now. And that is, of course, the new FFG Descent version Imperial Assault.
Indeed. And Tom, I'm excited about this. Have you reviewed it on your show yet?
I have. If you remember, Russ, I came up to you at Gen Con.
Yes.
And told you that there was going to be an announcement that I knew would blow your socks off.
Yes, I did. I remember that very clearly. So I know you've had access to it for a long time.
Well, no. I found out at Gen Con too. In fact, when they announced it, some of the Fantasy Flight guys turned and looked at me to see what my reaction would be. Cause I've been waiting for a land Star Wars thing for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And what makes this fantastic as listeners will know, because we've talked about this several times now, is Imperial Assault is the marriage of the Star Wars universe and the Descent board game, essentially, which everybody on both these shows are fans of. So
I know some people said that like it was a bad thing. They're like, yeah, it's just Descent with Star Wars.
That's
like, no,
your point.
you're saying that wrong. Right. It's Descent with Star Wars.
Exactly right. Exactly right. It's like peanut butter and chocolate. I'll give you an achievement for that, Tom. So, and this came out really recently, so it's just came out this past December. 2 to 5 players, 1 player playing. This is what I've termed the Overlord Dungeon Crawl format. Mm-hmm. And we just heard us talk for a while now trying to define what a dungeon crawl is, but essentially this is a dungeon crawl, sci-fi dungeon crawl, obviously, with 1 player playing the quote-unquote bad guys and a bunch of other players playing
quote-unquote. Because there's so many shades of gray
Well,
in
I could
Star
tell that
Wars.
Russ is the Overlord, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
The quote-unquote bad guy, Darth Vader.
Hey, he's redeemed in the end. That's all I'm saying. Spoiler alert. And Tom, what's been your experience with game length on this per session, let's say?
Once people know what they're doing, I think you can get them done in an hour, really.
I think so too. They say an hour and a half on the box, and that's totally fair. I'd say it's about an hour once you got it down.
Yeah. Skirmishes can be even faster.
Yeah.
Cool.
And we'll talk about that in a bit because there's different ways to play the game. And we've already talked about the theme. It's Star Wars meets Descent. Enough said. That's all I really didn't know. The time period for this, when is it exactly taking place, Tom? It's right after A New Hope, right?
Yeah, it's right after New Hope, and I think it's kind of nebulous on purpose to some degree. So the main characters are there and they're floating around, and you actually directly interact with them, but you don't actually affect any. And it's not like I killed Darth Vader. Now what will happen? Alternate timeline.
Right.
You can't really do that. But it's cool that they're there. In fact, I like the characters that they put in the box feel like they could have been in the universe.
Yeah,
yep,
absolutely.
Exactly right.
And not so sure on the Jedi character because they were kind of clear that there's only
one. Yeah, that
only
doesn't
one or whatever. But I'm willing to let that one
she's
slide.
She's not
because
a Jedi. She's just force sensitive.
Yeah, it's but she's got a lightsaber. But anyway,
I'm force sensitive.
Right.
Don't hit me.
And the list price for this is $99.95. So
they let you keep that nickel.
Keep the nickel. And we'll talk after we get through what's in the box. We'll talk about whether that's a good value. So let's talk about what's in the box. And Craig, what does it sound like when you open a box of Imperial Assault?
That's easy.
Yep. Just like that.
There's an ATSD in here. And that always is said.
That's
every time you open the box.
Every time you open the box. And so inside the box, yes, Tom's right. There's lots of awesome plastic figures, including a nicely sized ATST that goes together without glue. I know this because I've done it. I still have not glued mine together yet.
I'm so excited. I love it myself.
And
no gluing anything to your face.
I know,
right? Also really easy to paint up. Now, in addition to that, you get 3 or 4 booklets, really. Mm-hmm. You get the Learn to Play rule book, which is 16 pages long. And this is set up more like a traditional board game rule book that takes you through setup and playing a session. You also get
but this is, if I can pause for a second, this is Fantasy Flight's new model.
Yes.
They announced it this year at Gen Con that they would be doing this with all their games now. We're having separate rule books. We're a very short one on how to play.
Yep.
And then an index to look up everything else.
Yeah. And I like that. So as Tom mentioned, the second book you'll find in there, the second biggest book is the rules reference book. This is great reference. First of all the book's sorted by keyword and all the keywords in alphabetical order. So even if there were not an index on the back, which there is, which I love, you can easily find whatever you're looking for. You want to know about deployment cards? Go to the D's, right? So really easy. But the Learn to Play book is formatted as you might expect.
Learn about the player card, go to the D's.
The deployment cards. Deployment.
Deployment.
Okay. Deployment. Right. The monster cards are called deployment cards.
Remember, he's only played this for 15 minutes.
Yes, Deployment cards. Did I say that? Deployment with a D. Deployment card.
I thought you said player, but it's my ears or your articulation, one way or the other.
It could be. You also get a campaign guide, which is the fattest book, and this is all the cool scenarios in it.
Yeah.
And then you get the skirmish guide, which is a little 6-page booklet that tells you how to play the game head-to-head in a sort of a squad-based tactical combat game. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. So what do you guys think of the book quality? I think it looks fantastic. Do you like the new format, Tom?
Yeah, I really do, because you really can jump right into the game. The skirmish one, if you say, I don't want to do that right away, you can stick that away and not even look at it. Mm-hmm. And the campaign book, it's just really well laid out. They did a good job.
Agreed.
I think they did a great job, because I did the Learn to Play rule book, and I thought, oh my God, this is ridiculous. Like, where's all the other, where's the rest of the game? And then you find out, oh my God, they just taught me the game and I didn't even realize it.
Yep.
It's like, I mean, you leave the Learn to Play rule book knowing everything, and then the rest is keywords that key into the rest of the game. So I thought it was a very well done. I didn't like it until I realized they'd already taught me everything I needed to know.
That's right. As Tom mentioned, there's lots of awesome plastic figures that are really nice quality. Any thoughts on the figure quality?
It's the best figure quality Fantasy Flight has had. Although I haven't had any of the Descent to lieutenants, so I don't know. They might be made by the same, but they're hobby quality plastic models at this point. They're beautiful.
They're about on par with Cool Mini or not.
Yeah.
They're doing the same quality, both of them. I think they're a little bit better than the Descent stuff.
I agree.
Well,
yeah,
Descent 2 stuff is better than Descent 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think for sure they're better than Descent 2 out of the box. I don't know if they kicked it up a notch for the lieutenants or not.
Yeah, I say the lieutenants are pretty nice.
Yeah.
But it's about the same quality as the lieutenants. How's that?
Yeah.
Agreed.
The detail is great. The quality of the plastic is great. There's no bending issues. Even the little lightsaber that the woman's using bends a tiny little bit, but it's not like at right angles when it comes out of the box. And I thought the model quality was great.
Their model quality is great, and they're the right plastic. So if you spray them with normal figure primer, they don't get tacky, and they paint up great.
Treat them just like hobby models.
So you get that. You also get 59 of the big map tiles. Like you think about Descent, these are the things that puzzle piece together to make your game board,
which are beautiful.
You also get now it seems in every Fantasy Flight game, the dials. You get a couple of these dials. One tracks the rounds and one tracks your threat. Yep, threat's back for reals.
Yeah.
More about that later. You also get a bunch of the custom dice, which is now a Fantasy Flight trademark as well. You get lots and lots of cards, which it wouldn't be a Fantasy Flight game without more cards than you could possibly manage. So I always have a card manager.
At least half of which are tiny Cory cards.
Oh yeah, they're all over the place. Lots of cards. You also get a bunch of lots and lots of tokens. Some of them with the cool stand-up doors. And then in addition to all that, they list this separately, and it looks like they were thinking about making these separate expansions and just threw them in the box, which is the Luke Skywalker Ally Pack and the Darth Vader villain pack, which basically means you get a Luke Skywalker figure and a Darth Vader figure as well.
And each one comes with supporting information, like cards that you slot into the campaign or that you use for skirmish and missions that they come with. So they really enrich the whole game on both sides of the aisle, the skirmish and the campaign, with each of these packs. Also.
I feel like those were always planned to be in the box, but they put them in there to show you what that was like.
Exactly.
Yes,
that's exactly what I think they did.
So what do you guys think for $99.95? Is that a good value for what you get in the box?
I think it's silly.
At this point in time, yes. I mean, the prices of games are consistently going up. The $99.95 is kind of not a real price anyway, since you can get it cheaper than that. So you can get it for $70. Definitely worth it. And you know what? The rules alone are almost worth it. I mean, the plastic miniatures are great. I love them, but you're getting a quality game. I said before it's Descent plus Star Wars. Yay! But it really is more than that, which we'll get into in a moment.
It really is.
But it's a solid game you're getting.
It's a great game. And all the components are beautiful as you would expect.
Yeah, it really, I think it's a good value. So let's talk about how we play this game. First thing you got to do is set up. Now I'm going to go through this in a way that let's talk about just getting a scenario started, and then later we'll talk about the campaign format and how they pick the things. But basically, first thing you got to do is figure out what scenario you're going to play, and you're going to set up the board. Now, what's interesting about this game already that's a little different than Descent is that only the Imperial player gets perfect knowledge of the scenario. So make sure.
I love that.
Yeah, so it makes it a lot more fun. It gives you that mystery and a little more Dungeons and Dragons feel of like only the Dungeon Master knows what's going on. So that's great, but just make sure like all your players don't dive in and start reading that stuff. It doesn't destroy the experience, but it's definitely more fun.
It'll ruin I think, because you lose all that sort of tension and the excitement.
Yeah,
and
it definitely adds
it's
a lot
very more. It's Star Wars, man. You know the good guys are running down the hall, and all of a sudden a door is going to pop open. And there's going to be a bunch of stormtroopers.
Right. So
you don't want to know where they are.
You get your scenario, which could be a one-off or out of the campaign. Obviously, you got to determine who's going to be the Imperial player and who everybody else is going to be the heroes. So if you're a hero player, you're going to get your hero sheet matching your chosen hero. You're going to get your figure and your class deck. So like Descent 2, each hero's got their own matching class deck, which is going to be their powers. You're only going to start though with the weapon in your deck. So if you're you might have it's not even a lightsaber when you start, right? It's like it's an energy sword.
It's like a nano staff.
Yeah, but you start with one weapon each person.
Plasteel. I think it's the Plasteel staff.
Yep. And then each hero also gets an activation token. So setting up the heroes is real simple. There's not a lot of stuff to figure out.
No.
Imperial player, pretty similar. The map, he or she's going to set the map up based on the rule book, the scenario book. Put all the crates, the doors, the control panels, all kinds of other crazy cool stuff goes on the map there. You're also going to get an initial group of monsters, what I call them monsters because I'm talking about Descent, but they're actually called these deployment cards, which are essentially all the Imperial players' units, right? It's a group of stormtroopers, it's Imperial officers, it's a probe droid, it's an ATST, whatever. So those go face up on the table. So immediately already that's a little, I guess it's the same as Descent. Your monsters are always face up, but this is sort of the area these are the monsters you're going to summon in. You're also going to put some number of them on the board, and that's all indicated on the map as well. And of course, you want to read the opening fluff in a very menacing voice as the Sith Overlord player. And then you're pretty much ready to start. One more thing I forgot to mention is that there's actually 2 sets of these initial groups you're going to play with for your deployment cards as the Imperial player. One's going to go face up on the table. These are the guys that are already on the table. But then there's other, I keep trying to call them monsters, but I guess there's other Imperial forces that'll stay in your hand. So these are like the reserves. They call them open groups. And they stay in your hand, and then later you can play them with threat and bring them in later. So the heroes don't know everything that's going to be on the table. They only see the ones that start on the board.
Yep.
Makes sense so far?
Yep.
Setup, pretty simple. It's pretty fast. It's a little, setting the table up, actually, the map itself takes the longest time because you got to find all the bits in your box.
Yeah. And I have not yet found any way to organize it in such a way that makes it easy. Because it's double-sided.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I'll put all of the Death Star looking pieces over. Oh, wait. Then there's like some Tatooine pieces on the back. I can't.
Well, they did.
You should buy 2 sets.
There you go.
Just keep them. Then you can do that.
You could do that.
Well, they did a better job slightly on that. In the scenario missions now, they list all the piece parts on the bottom, which is a nice thing. So you can go through and you need the 8, because when they're double-sided, it's 8A, 8B or whatever, right? So so you kind of can find them quickly that way if you somehow sort your pieces all in part number order. But that doesn't really even work because they're all different sizes, so they can't fit in the same slots in your bag. So it's kind of it's still a challenge.
But it's a small price to pay.
It's a small price to pay for awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so we're all set up, and now it's time to play the game. So the goal of the mission really is dependent on.
Did you do? I think you missed the last bullet point there. Right?
What's that? Read the opening fluff in a menacing voice.
Read the opening fluff in a menacing voice.
Oh, thank you very much. That's excellent.
There you go.
You should be the Sith Overlord. Have you played this?
No, I'm good. I'm good as the Bothan spy.
All right, nice. One of the heroes, by the way, is the Wookiee, so it's just awesome.
That's true.
What's your favorite?
Fights over being him.
What's your favorite hero, Tom? Is it the Wookiee?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I still remember the first time I played. I always play as the Overlord, but when the Fantasy Flight guys taught it to me, I was the Wookiee, and I jump out of the shuttle, and there's all these stormtroopers there, and I'm like, "That's right, I'm a Wookiee. Bring it!" And it's just like ripping arms off. I don't know if I was actually ripping arms off, but I felt like I was.
Yeah,
and that's what matters.
That's what matters.
It's a game.
Yeah, there's the Wookiee. A lot of people like the female Han Solo. I forget her name, but that's what she is.
Yeah, the bounty hunter. Or mercenary.
Yeah.
So playing the game is pretty straightforward, and we're going to reference Descent 2 here a lot, but just to tell you the differences, but also I'll try to make sure we cover all the basics so you can not.
We'll make sure we don't that you don't need knowledge of Descent 2 to understand.
But I'm just gonna have to compare because
Russ is going to explain everything anyway. He's going to say first you use die that has 6 sides,
with different symbols on them. So
cup it in one hand and shake vigorously before dropping to the table.
The first thing to remember is the mission objectives changes every mission. And one of the things is that most of these missions now are timed. So make sure as the hero player or the Overlord, because sometimes it's timed against you, that you know it's timed and you watch the turn counter. And don't forget to advance the turn counter because that will break stuff if you don't. So
I don't think the Imperial player will ever forget that because usually it's like, oh, it's turn 6. Guess what happens now?
Guess what happens now? Yes, as Tom's pointing out, many of the scenarios have special events that happen at certain turn counts, which is also cool.
Yep.
All right. So, excuse me, at the high level, it's an integrated turn game, which is by far my favorite change to how it works in Descent.
Yeah.
So in Imperial Assault, it always starts with the heroes. A hero gets to activate. Then the Imperial player, i.e. Sith Overlord, gets to activate one of his deployment groups. So he'll get to activate a group of dudes or monsters, and then the heroes get to activate another hero. So in Descent 2, it was all the heroes go and have perfect knowledge of everything that's going to happen, and then all the Overlord pieces go. But in this one, it's back and forth, which is nice. Also does a good job for when you switch to skirmish mode with 2 players having alternating turn systems. Tom, what do you think about that change? Has it been helpful?
Oh, as the Overlord, it's fantastic because you guys can't say, okay, I'm going to open this door, then you run through it, then you do this. Now you don't know what I'm going to do between those turn suckers, so you better think carefully about what you're going to do. And it makes it a lot faster. It really does.
It really does, because I found the heroes don't try to calculate every possible option. In Descent 2, the heroes will pause because they have perfect knowledge of all that's going to happen before the Overlord gets to go. They'll try to run through every permutation, whoever goes first, second, and third, and fourth, and it does reduce analysis paralysis, which I like a lot. Craig, do you enjoy that change too?
I love it. I love it as a Rebel player because I think it makes for a much more dynamic, interesting cinematic game. And I don't know why, as an Overlord, like you would ever go back to Descent without trying to incorporate this rule, because it's almost like going to Descent 2 now. You'll be playing with your one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah, we've already determined we're going to house rule this in Descent 2 and see what happens. So basically, hero goes, then Overlord goes, then hero goes, and Overlord goes until all the pieces have activated. So let's talk about what happens when you activate a piece. So who's ever activating, hero or Imperial player, you're both going to go through the same process. So you can choose 2 different actions from the list of actions, much like Descent 2. One of them is move, and moving's very simple, but they've changed some language here to make it really straightforward. So you gain movement points now when you do a move action, which is nice wording because you basically, as in Descent 2, you can do an action anytime during your movement. So that second action, whether it's going to be an attack or interact with the door or whatever, you can do it halfway through your movement, then continue moving if you want. So moving's really straightforward. You move the number of squares indicated on your speed of your card. You can move through friendly models, as in Descent 2, but now you can also move through enemy models for an extra movement point. which is also a nice change because now you can slow the heroes down, or the heroes can slow the Imperial player down, but they can't totally block you out. And I've found that in Descent, I get blocked out more often than I block the heroes out. I don't know, Tom, if you've had that experience.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I'm a sad overlord sometimes.
I am too. I'm a very sad overlord. One thing, and just like Descent 2, terrain, there's different terrain types that slow you down and are impassable. Now, as in Descent also, you can spend your, what they call strain, which in Descent they call fatigue, which basically is your energy. You can spend your strain for extra movement points, but there's now a maximum. So you can do this as a maximum of twice. So you can spend 2 strain to go up to 2 extra squares. In Descent, you could spend as much stamina as you could, or fatigue as you could afford to go extra squares. I also love this change. I think this change plus the integrated turns are 2 of the most fundamental changes that have really improved the game experience. I think for both sides, but for Overlord in particular. Would you guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
I guess I didn't think it was as big of a deal as you, but I mean, I don't mind any restrictions put on the players. It's always a good thing in my eyes.
Yeah, well, there are some heroes in Descent 2 that can just go across the entire dungeon in one turn, and it's kind of like, really? And then they have acrobatics, so you can't even slow them down with monsters. So it's kind of hard to strategically play against that. I found. I
just tell them different rules and they don't know what's going on. I'm like, oh, this guy gets 16
works.
dice. You don't know that? It's in the thing. I'm not showing it to you.
It's right in there. So that's movement, pretty straightforward. So that's one action you can do. Now, of course, the second big action you're going to be wanting to pick a lot is attacking. And if you're a hero, both your actions could be attack. So you could basically stand still or maybe strain and move a couple spaces and then attack twice. If you're the Overlord, however, you can only ever attack once, regardless of the piece you're using.
Some can attack twice.
Oh, unless there's a special rule. My bad. Yeah.
Remember Darth Vader?
Yes, you're right. So some guys have special rules.
Even more than that. The web gun.
Yeah, the web gun. So you do need line of sight to attack, and they've clarified the line of sight rules a little bit. Now it's just you take from one corner of your square to any 2 corners of your target square. I love this change. Very simple. But it's actually constrains line of sight a little bit more and makes shooting around corners a little more interesting.
It sounds complicated, but it's like the best line of sight rule I think I've ever read.
It's up there, and that's always a point of contention to most
very
players.
Clear.
So very, very
Makes
clear.
It very clear.
So there's 2 attack types, as in the other games. There's a melee attack type, represented by a little sword, or there's a range attack type. And the only difference here is that melee must be adjacent. Range needs to get the accuracy number on the dice. More about that in a second. You're going to roll the dice indicated on your card. So most weapons have a dice pool, or the monsters have a dice pool. You roll the dice that match it, and the defender at the same time is going to roll his defense pool of dice. And again, these are different dice, and they also match the symbols on your card. And what you're hoping for here is the attacker is hoping to get a lot of damage icons. And he's also going to see some dice with numbers on them, and those need to add up and equal to or exceed the number of squares you are away if it's a range attack to make sure you have accuracy. So it's a terminology change. I know, Craig, you had some
yes, we had a bit of an issue. Yeah.
Conceptual challenge of the fact that it felt like it was too short of range for blasters, but it's really just how good you are at aiming, not so much the fact your blaster can't shoot 6 squares.
It still bugs me.
So there's that concept, which I like, though, because it means the farther away you are, the harder you are to hit. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to subtract the total number of blocks the target rolls from the total number of wounds indicated on the attack dice. And that's how many wounds you do, but there's a couple extra twists in here they've added. One is, as in Descent 2, there are surges the attacker can roll, and these surges can trigger cool abilities on the weapon card. And you can also spend 1 surge to recover 1 strain, which is cool. But in addition now, there are evade symbols that are on the defense dice, and each evade symbol reduces 1 surge rolled. Yeah. So now there are ways to reduce the number of surges on the dice, core to the defender's dice. And in addition to that, there's no longer a miss symbol on the attack dice as there is in Descent. The attacker will always hit assuming he rolls enough accuracy. But now the defender's dice has also a dodge icon, and if that shows up, the entire attack misses no matter what.
The light armor defense die has a dodge. The heavy armor defense die does not.
Which is really interesting. So basically, because the ATST has no light armor dice, you can never miss an ATST unless you're really, really bad in your accuracy. Yeah. It's really that it's just got really, really high dice that roll really high blocks. Yeah. So it's a really neat mechanic.
It's one of my favorite changes to the game. I like the 2 different dice. I like the fact how they work differently and they feel thematic. The one guy's dodging and rolling. The other guy's like, oh, I don't even feel that. And he keeps moving.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, it does.
It's very cool.
It works very well. It works very, very well. It's still nice.
Stormtroopers are way harder to take down than you would think.
And when you do wounds, it's very straightforward. So obviously the difference of those explosions we just talked about is going to be how many wounds you take. If a baddie's reduced to 0 wounds, take the plastic figure off the board. If it's the last plastic figure in that baddie's deployment group, for example, stormtroopers are deployed in groups of 3. So if you took all 3 of them out, I'm going to take the deployment card off of the table and put it back into my Overlord hand. And then I can play it again later as a reserve, but that costs more. So more about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Heroes, if they are reduced to 0 wounds, they flip their card over to the wounded side. So this is very different from Descent. So in Descent, the hero cards are double-sided, but with the one side up, you can still use your feat, your once per scenario power, special power. That's gone. There's none of those in Star Wars. But when you flip it over, now your count is wounded. And being wounded has a lot of bad things. First of all, the wounded side reduces some of your stats.
Yeah.
Depending on who you are. So now you're
speed and stamina, I believe.
Yes. Also, on the wounded side, that actually affects some scenarios. So some scenarios say
many scenarios.
A healthy hero must do this, or a healthy hero must do that, or the mission ends if there are no healthy heroes.
Yeah.
Healthy doesn't mean. Yeah. Go ahead, Craig.
Well, I was just going to say another one of our big misunderstandings when we first started playing. We thought that meant that if you had taken any damage at all, you were not healthy.
Right.
So we're like, oh my God, we're never going to be able to do that. But no, it's actually in the game. And I think inside the game, it kind of screws up the terminology and it uses a couple different terms interchangeably at one point, wounded versus healthy or something. I don't remember the specifics. But basically what you're looking at is if you're looking at scenario eligibility, you're looking at are you on your original facing for your sheet, or have you flipped? And if you flipped, then you are counted as wounded.
Yep.
And if you have not flipped, then you're healthy or unwounded or whatever term they're using in that particular sliding scale, because that's where the confusion came in.
Yeah, healthy.
Yeah, whenever it's referring to wounded, it means you've taken all your wounds once, so you've flipped your card.
Yes, page 13 of the Imperial Assault Rules Reference Guide clearly states, I actually covered nicely there under healthy. But yes, what is confusing about it is, as gamers, we intuitively feel like if you've lost any hit points, you're wounded. But really, in this game, you're not wounded until you're flipped over.
Yeah, I know. I think I agree. I agree with you on the term healthy.
Yeah.
I think what it was there's a scenario that doesn't use the term healthy. It uses a different term. That caused the confusion.
So then what happens, though, if you're on the wounded side up, and Tom, as Overlord, I love this, if you reduce their wounds to 0 and they're already on the wounded side of the card, they're removed from the scenario and they don't come back.
Yes.
Heroes actually die, kind of. They're not.
No, they don't.
They're not dead.
They're incapacitated.
They're incapacitated. We'll be back for the scenario. Tom, how do you feel about that particular element? I thought you might like it. Now it does.
I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but the one thing I really like about this game is it lets me go all out.
Yeah.
And the heroes fear me, which is the way it should be. I'm Darth Vader, for crying out loud.
That's right. Now you could argue, because in Descent, you guys come back. They stand right back up. And there's some penalties, but they're really not that harsh. Although the nice thing about that is, if I'm looking at it from a purely gamer point of view, is that all players are still engaged. So there is technically player elimination in this, because you can get knocked out, but it's really hard to knock the heroes all the way out. And healing's a little easier. We'll get to that in a minute. So because of that, I think, and that's why I think they improved healing a little bit.
Right. And the sessions are short. So
they are.
You're not going to get knocked out like in the first couple
campaign,
of turns,
right,
unless you've done really something awfully stupid. So you're talking about for the last, like I died in one scenario, and it's very cool because it's like chess. You're actually, is it worth me sacrificing myself to get this done towards the mission? And again, it goes back to how important the missions are, how balanced the missions are.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, I can do A, B, and C, but then I'm going to be hanging in the breeze and probably die. And everybody's like, yep, well, that's the price to pay for being a good guy.
Yep.
And so, like, and even in the scenario where I died, it was like maybe 10 more minutes, and I was on the edge of my seat watching what they were doing, completely invested because I had sacrificed myself to put them in the position where they could do that.
Yeah,
I think as a player, it's a great mechanic.
I think it adds drama, as you say, Craig. It adds drama for the heroes too. So I think it's a great mechanic.
Oh, I loved it.
So that's two of the actions. You can move, you can attack. And it sounded like there's a lot to attacking, but it's really very straightforward once you've done it twice.
Right.
You can also interact, which is really a trivial action. Basically, it's opening a door, popping open a supply crate. Opening a supply crate basically means you're going to get a supply card. This is like doing a search in Descent. They simplified this a little bit. So you get a supply card. It's got something cool on it, but also you keep the little crate token, and that's always worth 50 credits at the end. So you're getting money for supplies as well as the action of the supply that you can use during the game.
But it's not equipment that you keep.
No, it goes away.
It goes away at the end of the mission, which is a little.
That's the same as Descent.
Is it?
Okay. Yeah, they do.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
The search cards all go back also.
Yep.
So if you don't use those health potions by the end, they're gone.
Right.
And also, there's other things that are mission-based for interacting, like interact with the control panel to do this. Right. So that's that. And now the other significant change, I think, here is how the rest action works. So the third thing you can choose to do is to rest. And when you rest, you recover all of your strain. Now, they made this a little easier. I think in Descent, you had to wait to the end of your turn to get your strain back or something. And that was in some ways to prevent the whole running across the table twice. So you could run across the table, rest, and then run across the table again or something crazy. But they took that. Anyway, you don't have to worry about that
You got
anymore.
a lot of munchkins in your gaming group.
Oh, my God. You would not believe any. Yeah, it's yes. So anyway, now when you rest, it's kind of cool. When you rest, you get your endurance value back, which is basically your total strain value. So let's say your strain is 6, you get 6 back. But here's the cool part. For every point extra you don't need back, because let's say you're fully rested or whatever, those go to heal your wounds. So you can heal just by basically taking a rest action. And this is huge, and this will keep the heroes from dying off. And it's why I think they're not really wounded, because by standing around, it's kind of like your wounds or your health loss is actually just sort of like something else until your card flips over. Anyway, so I really like...
You were going to come up with something.
I had something great that didn't work out.
You
but
just gave up.
What do you guys think about the rest healing you now?
It's hard to make that decision, especially when you figure... I mean, you cannot understate the importance of the time constraints in these missions. When you've got 6 turns to do everything you need to do, that includes like moving all the way across the board, interacting with all these spice barrels or whatever you're trying to interact with. It very seldom do you feel the luxury of, so I'm going to rest now.
I think the hero should rest every turn if possible.
Yeah, exactly.
It does make it tempting for them to rest a lot.
It does. And in our games, Dave rests a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think the Bothan has more, actually not, that's not true. Dave's like the Jedi girl and I'm the Bothan, sniper. And I've got a lot of things that trigger off of my strain. I'm almost never resting because I'm too busy trying to do stuff. And Dave, I think the Jedi girl is actually very limited when she doesn't have strain, is why he's resting a lot more than I am. But I don't feel like I can ever afford to rest. The game has so much tension and excitement built into it that very seldom are you like, so I'm just gonna rest. I mean, you do at key moments or if you're about to die, but you feel the tension of sacrificing something important when you rest.
Yeah, they keep the pressure on, which is nice. Yeah. And the last thing you can do really is your special actions, which are basically any card ability with an arrow on it. So basically, the big things you're going to be doing most of the time is moving, attacking, and occasionally resting. And interacting once in a while. But those are really the big things. And that's the core of what you do. So after you activate, you're going to then have to remind everybody you're done. So you're going to flip over. The heroes all have little activation tokens that are double-sided. Red means you've already gone. And the Imperial player, he's going to turn his... the group he activated, the deployment card, sideways on the tabletop that's already activated. So you're going to see, as you look at the Overlord player, you're going to see which groups he's already activated each turn. And you, as the hero player, is going to activate, and you're going to keep going back and forth like this until everybody's all done. Right?
And sometimes that means that a bunch of bad guys might go in a row, or a bunch of good guys.
Right, depending on how the groups are rating out. So there's definitely an incentive. There's a little bit of metagaming going on, because you really want to, if there are 2 groups of stormtroopers, and there can be. So one thing that's interesting about this is, in Descent, there's no monster groups that look the same. So you'll never have like 2 groups of beastmen. But in this game, you do. So you'll have 2 squads of stormtroopers or 3 squads of stormtroopers. And it's tempting for the heroes to shoot whichever stormtrooper makes sense, but you might leave 3 different troops alive. And really what you want to do is eliminate whole troops together, because it costs the Overlord more to bring them back, and it reduces the number of activations he has. So there's some interesting metagame options too.
It's the right thing to do, because if a guy's dead and his friend's all sad, kill his friend, because I mean you're helping
deal with his mourning.
Right,
exactly.
Right. You're just reducing suffering. It's what we're here for. So that's pretty much the whole activation sequence. After everybody's gone, there's this thing called the status phase. And this is sort of the cleanup action that happens across the board. And it's a little more involved when you're playing a campaign game, so I'm going to go through that. Once all the figures have activated, the Overlord is going to get the Imperial player, I can't help, he's a Sith Lord. I'm just going to call him Sith Lord from now on. The Sith Lord is going to get some threat. And it's based on how far down into the campaign you are. So in the beginning, it's 2 a turn. So I'm going to increase my threat dial up by 2. Everybody
it's dictated by mission, right?
It's how far it's the mission, how far into the campaign of missions you are. It's not the specific mission. It's kind of weird. We'll get to that in a second. Think of it like mission count. If you're on your 5th mission, it's worth more than you're on the 2nd mission. Then what's going to happen is everybody's going to ready their exhausted cards. So the heroes flip over their tiles, and we're going to flip those cards back, so they're going to be able to activate again next turn. And now the Imperial player can do what's called deploy and reinforce. Best part of the game. Tom,
sorry, I get excited.
Well, it sounds good for you, Tom. So why don't you describe how deploying and reinforcing works?
Well, one of the things, I think there's 2 different costs. So you can put out a whole group, or you can add to a group that's already out there.
Yep.
That's the reinforce thing. And this is completely different than Descent, if I recall correctly.
That's right.
In fact, both Descents are very different. I'm pretty happy with it. And sometimes I'll sit there and I'm agonizing over whether I want to add another person to an existing group or bring out one of my groups I haven't brought out yet.
I love this because I think the biggest problem in Descent 2 is that reinforcements are written into the mission. And the problem with that is, and it's usually like one guy back a turn. So it doesn't scale well with larger player groups, and it doesn't give the Overlord any flexibility. And none of the open groups you ever pick in Descent are the ones that can respawn. It's always, that one goblin a turn or something. And so you don't really have a tactical option. And here, you really have some interesting tactical options, and you can get some crazy stuff. Like you can later in your open groups, it could be Darth Vader in your hand. Now, Darth Vader's 17 threat to bring onto the board. So if you're getting 2 threat a turn, you're not going to be playing Darth Vader's just not going to show up one of the early campaign missions. You're not far enough along. No one knows who these heroes are. They're not powerful enough for anybody to care. But later in the campaign, you can be getting 5 threat a turn, 6 threat a turn. So now 3 or 4 turns in, boom, Vader shows up. Yeah. Oh, God. So it's really cool how you can escalate. So when I'm picking my open group cards as Overlord, I got to decide, well, I could have this really, really powerful card, but he won't show up until later in the mission, unless it's later in the campaign. So you got to choose, even during the setup phase, whether the Overlord's going to choose, do I want to take a bunch of cheap monsters, or do I want to take some really powerful stuff that's going to take me longer to bring to the table?
Yeah, but the cool thing about the campaign is you have to earn the really powerful cards, too.
Yeah.
By you have to insinuate the Vader mission, for instance, into the stream of missions the heroes have to perform.
Right.
And you have to win the Vader mission in order to earn Vader as an open card, which I think is an awesome mechanic also.
But it also opens the expansions wide, right? So they can just pop out new boxes with more monster cards in them, and you just put them in your hand, and if it's a powerful monster, it's going to cost more threat to get on the table.
Yeah.
So really, really great stuff there. And then of course, don't forget to advance the round dial, and you're done. You're ready.
So good. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, what was that, Tom?
You're saying that's right up there with teaching them how to roll dice?
It is, yes.
Yes, it was. I thought that was important that your listeners needed to know that. But go ahead.
They need to know to advance the round dial, Tom. Come on now. So that's pretty much how the core mechanics of the game work. So that once you've done that once, you just rinse and repeat until you've completed the mission objectives, and it's over. Now, this cool, as Tom mentioned before, some of the missions have really cool effects that happen depending on where you are. It might be an event that happens when the heroes activate a particular control panel, or a lot of times a certain round number gets hit. So in round 5, something cool happens. So keep an eye on that. And
think of it this way, in the movies, you'll hear the music swell up and a door will slide open. Doors always slide open for bad guys.
Yeah.
It will slide open and out steps somebody. And you're like, the good guys always go, oh my, they're like muttering expletives and, screaming in horror. And I'm so happy.
Yes.
It's such a good moment. And it really is cool for the story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It works like this in our game group. It's turn 6, says the Overlord. Let me go consult the mission group. And then the entire table goes, I've got a really bad feeling about this. That's pretty much how it works. So that's it. But of course, what makes this awesome is not the fact that the combat system is really cool and quick and that there's all kinds of cool monsters you can fight and all that other stuff, all great Star Wars characters. What makes it really cool is there's a campaign system around it where each scenario builds on itself and your heroes level up. So
this is where I'm going to disagree with Russ. He said earlier that the integrated turns was the best thing about the game. It is by far the campaign system.
Okay.
This is the best campaign system I've ever seen in a game.
It's really good.
So wonderfully put together.
It is really, really good. And I will happily agree to disagree with you on that because I think the whole game's awesome, so it doesn't really matter. But so
we're talking about 0.0001 degrees.
Right. So when you're doing a campaign, when you're starting a campaign, it's pretty similar to starting a game. Of course, you're going to pick your heroes. The Imperial player is going to pick his class now, though. So like the heroes picking which hero they're going to play, there are different Imperial class decks. I took the Tech Superiority class, and after
me too.
After just 3 missions, my stormtroopers are sporting jetpacks, baby. So that's all good. My Imperial probe droids are healing people. So this is cool. So kind of like the heroes get to level up in their skills, the Overlord now gets a class deck, and he can level up in different abilities for his people. And it's different. Tom may not have chosen the jetpacks. He may have chosen something else.
No, I did, man. Jetpacks. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, so it's great. And also, they have experimental weapons right from the get-go, and of course, you can basically wound your guy to get an extra pound of damage. It's kind of funny. The guns overheat. So you do that. Then the Imperial player builds an agenda deck. There's a bunch of rules around this. We don't have to get into details on it, but basically, this is going to be events that happen in between scenarios. This kind of replaces the whole flip cards over and see what happens when you travel in Descent. And I like this a lot better because the Imperial player has a lot more control over what happens as well. So then the Rebel players get to build a deck too.
Can I talk about this?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
This mission deck is just amazing.
Oh yes.
Because there's missions that you are going to go through based on what's happened in previous missions. They have this nice grid lined up. But then every once in a while you get to go to an optional mission. And the optional missions are crazy in how much the heroes are going to sit there and agonize over which one they pick.
Yeah.
Do you want to go on this one and get Chewbacca to join you? Or do you want to go get your lightsaber? And the lady who wants the lightsaber, she's saying, I think the lightsaber. And they're like, yeah, but Chewie.
Everybody else is going Chewbacca.
And it's really a tough thing because they're both really good, but you can only do one of them right now. And then there's random missions that come up that they're like, just a side quest or something that's come up. And what this does is it allows you to play through the whole thing. You play through the second time, and the last mission and the first mission will be the same, but it's possible everything else is different.
Yep. It's awesome too, Tom. You're mentioning the vacillating between which missions to play. And the other option is out of that agenda deck, the Overlord can play events that actually become also missions they can choose.
Yeah.
And how these missions
that they have to take before they can choose any other
They
mission.
can either block you and say you have to take it, or they can be optional and you could ignore it. But if you ignore it and never do it, after a certain number of things, the Overlord gets a new power. So it's kind of like so now what do? Do you get Chewie? Do you get the lightsaber? Or do you go stop the Overlord from getting Darth Vader or something? Yeah. So there's a lot. It's really, as you say, Tom, it's awesome.
I'll give you guys a hint. You should stop the Overlord from getting Darth Vader. Seriously.
Yes,
if that is ever an option you come across, do it.
Just
couldn't agree more.
This is one game. I played a lot of these D20, games that Darth Vader's in, even in X-Wing.
Right.
In X-Wing, Darth Vader he's good, but he's not like Darth Vader. He's Darth
Vader.
Darth Vader, man.
He's Darth Vader.
You better stay away from him.
He's force choking one of your guys, cutting another one of them down, and blocking bolts with a third. He's the man. So you build this cool deck, and Tom also hinted this, which is, I love this part of it too. The reason the Rebel players build this deck is because some of the cards that go in there have to be based on the heroes they chose. So there's basically always special side missions directly keyed to your particular hero.
And they're so fun.
She wants to get a lightsaber. So that's going to change it up. It's also going to be that hero's going to really argue, I got to go get my lightsaber, which is awesome. So that's really cool. Then what you got going on is, I'm sorry, I lost my page here, my detailed notes here, Tom.
Random gray missions.
We're on page 736.
Thank you. So basically, and Tom's already kind of explained how it works. So basically, there's a number of missions you're going to play, a little list in the book. And the first mission's fixed. It's always a story mission. But then after that, there's going to be some number of these side missions you got to choose from that pool, as Tom described. And then it's going to go back to a story. And the story mission, whether you win or lose a particular story mission, is going to tell you the next story mission you're going to be going to. So the real variables here are all the side missions you can play from, which is pretty cool. But because it's all totally card driven, there's no more maps or anything else. You can see how this is going to be very, very easy for expansion. Just pop out with new decks of mission cards, and boom, you got a whole new thing. So the other thing that happens with the depth of the missions, so in this little how many missions you're in, a couple things, it affects every mission in a couple of interesting ways. First of all, if you're, let's say, on mission 4, it's going to increase the amount of threat the Overlord gets every turn. So in the first couple missions, the Overlord's only getting 2 threat per turn, but later he's getting 3 threat per turn, 4 threat per turn. So the particular way that in Tom's campaign, for example, his characters might have chosen to do the lightsaber mission second. So when Tom played it, he was only getting 2 threats a turn. When my campaign, my heroes made it decide not to do the lightsaber mission until the 7th mission, and all of a sudden I'm getting 6 threat a turn. So that right there is going to change the dynamic of what kind of creatures you're going to fight and everything else as well. So you can see right there's a lot of replayability going on, which I really like also. Mm-hmm. The other thing that happens is after each mission, the heroes can do a little shopping, and depending on the mission count you are in the campaign as well, that's going to affect the kinds of equipment tiers you can buy from. So kind of like in Descent, there's like Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 equipment. In here, there's Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. So the stuff the heroes can buy are going to be impacted not by the mission they're in specifically, but how far down the campaign list they've gone through. So those 2 things are affected by how many missions you played. So pretty much that's most of it. Now there's an overall structure we probably want to mention. So we talked about the fact it goes from story to side missions. There's the agenda missions, which you talked about. The Overlord can mess those up. You play your mission, and then after each mission, you get a bunch of cool cleanup. The heroes all heal. The supply cards, as Craig mentioned, all go back to the deck. You get your 50 credits per crate. The current mission you just played is back in the game box. It's out of the game. You're not going to play that same mission again. And now if that mission was a side mission, you're going to draw a new side mission from the deck. So basically there's going to be this little set of missions, as Tom mentioned, always out for the heroes to consider what they're going to do next. Yeah. And the only time they don't get a choice is if it says you got to go to a story mission next. You got to play that story choice. And also, as we mentioned, there's now a Rebel upgrade phase. So you can now spend your credits. You basically have 2 resources as a hero. You get credits, which are basically like the gold coins in Descent, for winning scenarios. And you also get XP for every scenario you play. So you can spend your coins on buying those items. So 6 of those items get dealt from the appropriate tier deck. And the heroes can agonize over what they're going to buy.
Or fight.
And fight.
It gets ugly.
The money pool is shared. So you got to decide if there's that really, really good new blaster on there. And also what's cool now, Tom, have you played a lot with the weapon attachments?
I haven't played a lot with them, but I like them.
Yeah, they're really cool. Craig, have you messed with those things yet? They're really neat.
Yes. We've actually got a bunch of attachments in our party now. I haven't scored one yet, but there's several. And I love the fact that they're for both ranged weapons and hand-to-hand weapons.
Yeah.
Like extended haft, for instance.
Right. So what's cool is weapon cards now have little icons on them that tell you how many attachments they can support. And then there's attachments cards you can attach to these weapons. So it gives that little bit of like MMO Knights of the Old Republic crafting feel, which I kind of like. And it doesn't feel like you're constantly swapping out your blaster. It's your same old trusty blaster. You just made it cooler.
Right.
Which is neat. And in addition to that, you can also spend your XP on a new ability. So there's
those are tough too.
Each of these heroes has their own ability deck. And can you guys give us some examples of some of your favorite abilities?
I know the Wookiee has one ability where you've got the keyword hack, or no, what is it? What's the keyword? Cleave.
Cleave, yes.
Cleave,
yes,
which is
yes.
If you do damage to target A, you can do whatever your cleave value is in damage automatically without armor rolls or anything to any other model eligible for you to attack at the same time. So you give the Wookiee he's got an ability where he can cleave people. He can get that ability. I have an ability as the Bothan sniper. I have an ability where I can spend strain to reroll failed attacks or attack again if I didn't knock somebody down, for instance. And they've all got cool quotes, little flavor quotes on the cards. Like, and stay down is the flavor quote for my ability that's like, ambush or something. I can't remember what it's called, but I basically shoot at you, and then if I don't kill you, I spend a strain and I get to shoot at you again, but I'm focused, which is a mechanic in the game that adds an additional die to your dice pool when you're attacking. So they're very cool. There's the Jedi girl has one where she can use a strain. She can spend a strain, take a strain to re-roll her dodge dice. Things like that, or to take a dodge die away from a bad guy because she can read their mind as she's attacking. There's all kinds of cool. All of it's very fluffy. All of it sort of fits in with where your character is, like sort of building their niche in the party. It's very, very cool stuff. You agonize over how you spend your XP.
Definitely. And it's a similar agony for the Overlord, right, Tom? Because in this game, the Overlord also has 2 now things he can spend. He's got Influence, which is kind of like credits, but it's just a lower point value. And he's also got XP. So now what happens, remember that agenda deck, the Overlord can draw 4 cards from the agenda deck and buy some of those from Influence. So kind of like the Overlord also gets to go shopping.
What a good day.
It is a good day. And then also he can spend XP to buy some of those abilities from his class deck he chose. So that high-tech deck, that's where I bought my jetpacks. So Tom, what do you feel about the Overlord getting to do all that shopping with both the agenda cards and the XP?
I'm pretty happy with it. Again, I play these games so that the heroes have fun. I have fun too, and I joke about wanting to crush them. Well, it's only partially a joke. I really do want to crush them. But, I mean, it's all, at the end of the day, if they have choices. So I'm glad I have more choices, and I like the fact that it makes me, they realize that I'm always evolving, always changing. I'm never going to be a pushover.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the whole campaign system. And as you mentioned, Tom, you think it's the best part of the game. What elements of it do you like the most?
Of the campaign system?
Yeah.
I like the different missions, and I like how what you do in one mission affects the next mission. Mm-hmm. That's something they did in Descent 2. But Descent 2, it had like a minor change in the next mission. Yep. Here it determines what mission you go to next, yes, which helps make a very solid story. And I'm really curious, when they make an expansion, I'm not even going to say if, because that's just insulting. When they make an expansion and they have new campaign, how will these missions slide from one campaign to the other? I'm curious to see how that will work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so far, it's really cool. And the missions that come with Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker slide right in real easy.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And you can see the missions. I love the Han Solo mission was fantastic. So yeah, I like you're right, Tom. It conveys a better story than Descent even does, which is interesting because Descent 2 did such a good job of that. I didn't think that could be improved, and they did a really, really nice job.
Well, this is really Descent 3.0.
It really is. It really is.
I don't think well, we're going to get to that later. Never mind.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. One last thing we should probably just at least highlight, which is the skirmish rule set.
Let me talk about this. I played it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, the skirmish is basically, it's like a mission, mm-hmm, but instead it's one player versus the other player. So it's a 2-player game. You get points, and most of the cards are very similar, but there's some changes, like the main characters have skirmish cards. Mm-hmm. So I can use the Wookiee, whatever his name is, mm-hmm, and I can use Chewbacca. I can have 2 Wookiees moving down here. And this is one thing, by the way, let me rabbit trail here for a moment. I don't know if you mentioned there are some miniatures not in the box.
That's true.
Did you mention that?
We did not talk about that.
No.
Good catch.
There's a lot of characters in these missions, Chewbacca, Han Solo, IG-88, and other characters, that there's counters for them, which drives me crazy because a counter just doesn't look intimidating when everything else is a miniature. But their first wave of packs for these is coming out soon, I would imagine in a month or two, and we're going to be forced to buy them all.
Yes.
But just realize you can still play with all this stuff. They have cards for it and everything. Mm-hmm. For Chewbacca, you can use him in a mission, in a skirmish mode too, but you have to use the counter. Although if I'm playing skirmish and I'm using Chewbacca, I'm using the other Wookiee model.
Right.
Because, come on, it's Chewbacca.
Or let's be honest, those Star Wars Wizards of the Coast it was Wizards of the Coast did Star Wars.
Yeah, the D20 stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff, you can get those for cheap out there now. Or you've got a collection already. I've got a giant
Fantasy
collection.
Flight's listening.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Corey.
Just saying.
Our bad.
Oh, by the way, I have already bought and paid for in pre-order all of these packs we're talking about. So I'm just talking about in the interim.
Right. I've already bought them all.
Just saying.
So anyhow, the skirmish mode, you can play anyone against anyone. You want Darth Vader, he's like half the points of your army, but you can take him. And there's different things. And you're also building a deck of cards. This is only for the skirmish game, special abilities, and some of these cards cost points, and you have so many points to build a deck of cards. So you're building 2 things. You're building an army and this, but you really could throw this together in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not something you need Army Builder for, although maybe in 2 years you will. Right. And it's not like this big grandiose thing. It's kind of the same as playing a mission, but it's you versus the other. Now, it's not just fight to the death. It might be a very specific mission, like you might both have landed on this freighter and there's some spice on there and you need to get it off first. So you can either get spice or kill the opponents, one of those things.
Yeah.
And so you're running around with your people. It's back and forth action and moving to different models. And I don't like it as much as the campaign, but it's like if they sold this game in a separate box, I'd probably get it. I probably would, because I'd be like, ooh, a 2-player fighting Star Wars game. The fact that it's in this box with this game, that's amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Every character that you come across, that's amazing.
Yeah. I think it's up there with Dungeon Command. It's got a solid gameplay. I like it a lot, and
okay, well, you just ruined your credibility, but still,
come on, Dungeon Command's fine. What are you talking about? Tom Vasel, you are so picky. Dungeon Command's awesome.
Yeah, where's the dice?
It's a
card game. There's more cards.
Wow, you just both of us at the same time.
Oh, it's pretty impressive.
I like Dungeon Command's okay. It was totally overrated, and there's a reason it's not in print anymore.
All right, fair enough. But in any case, it's a great skirmish game. I do like the fact there's 3 factions out of the box. We didn't mention this, but the deployment cards actually come in 3 little mini decks. You got your Imperial deck, you got your Rebel deck, and you got what I'm calling the other deck. Do they ever name that other deck?
I think it's Scum and Villainy.
Scum and Villainy. Okay, yeah.
And it's the same faction as the new third faction in X-Wing.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah, that makes sense. But it's got like some animals, and it's got a couple of the guys, Bosk there, and some other folks like that. And so it's a great, I think IG-88's in there. So it's a great like third faction to play. So it's nice. It looks really, really great. I haven't actually had a chance to play it yet, but I've digested, eaten, consumed the rules, and I can't wait to play with Craig. Just got to nail them down.
I can't wait either.
So,
and everything's painted.
So it's just amazing, as Tom said, that they jammed this in there. And it's not, what's interesting about it is, it's not just they threw in a rule leaflet. It's a 6-page rule book. And then they also have a couple special decks of cards just for the skirmish game as well. So they put some time into it, which is nice.
And every one of these, plastic packs, like the Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, they come with a campaign mission, but they also come with a new skirmish mission.
Right. So you're going to have, after buying all these
Actually, I think they come with 2 skirmish missions.
You're right.
2 skirmish and 1 campaign, which is great.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. So as you buy each of these expansions, by the time you're done, you're going to have lots of choices, which is awesome. So, and speaking of expansions, as Tom's already mentioned, there's going to be way too many of them, and my wallet fears them because I'll buy them all.
Yeah, I'm glad I spent this money like 4 months ago.
Yes.
I'm just eager for them to come out.
I'm really excited about this. The skirmish thing is nice. The plastic miniatures are great for the skirmish game and all these things, but I'm really excited. You're going to ask later on if this kills Descent 2.
I am.
And one of the things I like about Descent, as current as it is that when I play against people in Descent, they have no idea what I'm going to pull out.
Right.
Because there's so many monsters.
Yeah,
in
true.
Star Wars, it's not like that yet. Obviously, there's just this box set. And I'm not knocking all the stuff in this box set. But after a while, they realize some things they're never going to see. Mm-hmm. But there's so much I know is on the way. And I cannot wait until I have, you have no idea what I'm going to pull out. Yeah. And the Star Wars universe, even if you limit yourself to stuff you can see in the 3 original movies.
Right.
And they're not limiting themselves to that. But let's say that's all you limit yourself to. They could make 1,000 different plastic models?
Oh, yeah.
Just from the Cantina alone.
Right.
Right.
They should make an expansion called Cantina, and I would buy it immediately. Period. Yeah. Sight unseen.
Right.
Wouldn't you?
It'd be awesome terrain.
Oh, yeah. No,
I'm gonna bring in those musicians.
Mos Eisley.
The Mos Eisley band. That's my new gang.
Well, it is the Scum and Villainy faction. Pretty much that's where they are. So let's we're going along here. Let's wrap it up a little bit, but let's talk about this. So let's give it our final reviews and our ratings. But before we do all that, so Craig?
Yes.
In the style of an Imperial officer about to be force choked by a Sith Lord, please describe the patent pending D6G rating system.
Okay. My lord, that information you asked for is here immediately. Oh, my lord. What? No, it's simple. It's simple, man. No, seriously, it's simple. It's a die roll. It's a D6 die roll, and you're looking to get below a certain number. So the lower the number of the no, my lord, seriously, it's very simple. No is good. I find your lack of math disturbing.
Nice.
Yeah, he took too long. That's what happens.
That's what happens. So basically, lower is better. So, Tom, would you like to go first as our guest with your final thoughts? Or do you want to save it for last? Go ahead.
This is a solid game. This is the game that I've been wanting forever. Star Wars in this kind of system, miniatures. I mean, I got excited playing the D20 version that Wizards put out, but it was just a random jumble, right? No story behind it. Mm-hmm. This has a great story. It has great mechanisms. They streamlined this, it went from Doom to Descent 2 to this. They know what they're doing at this point. And it's a great value in a box. They managed to put it in a pretty small box considering all that's in it.
Yep.
And there's an ATST and there's 2 games. and I love it. So I'm giving this a 1+. That's the highest, right?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Wow, Tom.
Really, it really is probably in my top 20 games of all time. Easily might make the top 10. That's how much I like it.
Wow. Nice, Tom. Wow, that's very good.
Go.
So let me ask you this question, Tom, because I know you play. You already talked a little about it. Our group's been debating this for a while now. Does this kill Descent 2 for your group?
Here, it's an easy answer for me, and that's no. Okay. And because sometimes I want to play fantasy, and sometimes I want to play Star Wars, and so I have both. Not to mention I've invested so much in Descent.
Yeah,
but sometimes I want to play fantasy, and there's some stuff in Star Wars that's going to be the way it is because it's Star Wars. In Descent, I like the traps. I don't know how much traps you'll see in Star Wars, everywhere.
Right.
And there's the spawning of a million goblins. I don't know. It just has a different feel to it. And
it's not really a dungeon.
And I don't understand this. And it's mind-boggling to me, but not everyone's a Star Wars fan. Now that will be changed probably next 10 years. They'll make a law about it. But until that point, some people are going to be more interested in Descent. So for me, no. Descent's in my top 10 games. It's going to stay there, but I can see this one sliding up next to it.
All right. Craig, what about you?
Very good. Well, first, I'd like to clarify the three official names for the factions are Imperials, Rebels, and Mercenaries.
All right, there we go.
Okay. I love the game. I'm a giant Star Wars fan. I have never once spent a dime on anything Star Wars and regretted it. So 95, 99, 95, whatever it was a no-brainer for me. And I
can send you the DVD of the Ewok Christmas special?
No, that's okay. Maybe that was hyperbole. Okay, you called me on it. I get it. It's valid. It's a valid criticism. I love it. It is, to me, it's what I liked Descent. I loved Descent. I loved Descent 2. I loved it when I got a chance to play in some campaigns, not very often and mostly subbing in because of my schedule. But when I tried to start a Descent campaign, it was okay. Some of my players didn't really like it. So it kind of petered out. It fixes all of the, whether they're minor flaws or major flaws. I feel that this really addressed any weakness that Descent 2 had, and it's Star Wars. So I would say, if you're going into if you're a sci-fi guy, if you're going into a dungeon crawl, if you like Star Wars, this game is, I'm going to say it's a 3+ straight up. But if you are a Star Wars fan or a dungeon crawl fan, or a sci-fi fan in general looking for a cool game, then it's going to be a +1. And the fact that it has a skirmish game attached to it, which exactly as Tom said, takes that old game that was very, very, very free form and didn't have any sort of cool story to it and puts just as cool stories into it as the rest of the campaign missions. So I think it's, if you fall into any of those categories, this is almost a no-brainer.
Yeah. I agree with both of you completely. And for the Descent 2 thing, I had the same discussion with our group, and as Tom observed, we do have some very hardcore rules guys in my group. And I say they're the utmost love because I'm sort of that guy too. But
I would never have guessed.
And so it is, but like you, Tom, I have a huge investment in it, and I love the fantasy part. And so some members of our group, like Randy's like, no, this doesn't kill Descent 2 for me. I'm loving Imperial Assault, but I love Descent, and I love the overarching stories and the fact there's like already 5 different campaigns you can play. And to your point, Tom, there's like a gajillion monsters, and the models are fantastic, and you're fighting dragons and Etons. And so the real thing is, though, I think I need to house rule parts of Descent 2 now, because I see how much better it could be with a couple small tweaks. So I'm hopeful, and I'm sure we could figure that out as gamers, but I'm hopeful that Fantasy Flight does a slight tweak to Descent 2 in a way that doesn't need to replace everything, but we'll see. But I think they could do that. As for Imperial Assault, I am in love with it. I think it's fantastic. I think everything you guys just said is right on. I love the fact that it is a great campaign system. The integrated turns makes it a real challenge for the heroes now. I feel like I have a chance as Overlord against players who are really, really good. And it's just it's a lot of fun. And I think there's the ability for expansions to jump in here is awesome. Like little things like in Descent 2, like as the lieutenants come out, they're awesome, but I have to start a whole new campaign to bring a new lieutenant in because you can only ever have one lieutenant per campaign. So I might have a big collection of lieutenants, but I will never see half of them until I start yet another campaign. But in this game, the way open groups work, if they release a new cool monster, it could just be in my next open group. It could come out right in the middle of my campaign and jump on in. Even a hero like Boba Fett. If Boba Fett came out tomorrow, he could be with a side mission to inject them, but that's a little tricky. But if he was just a monster card, I could stick him right in. So there's a lot of cool things they could do there, and it's pretty awesome. So I'm loving it a lot. I think it's a 2+ of the reroll. I think if you're a Star Wars fan, the only reason not to buy this game is that all your friends already own it and you don't need that many copies.
True.
That's the only real reason. If you're the alpha gamer in your group and somehow no one has bought this thing yet, just run out and buy it now because everybody's going to love it. It's going to be great. And it really the mechanics are so sweet on the dungeon crawl side. It's really nice. So that's all there is to say about that. It's fantastic.
I'm going to change my rating.
All right, what are you going to make it?
I'm going to say a 2+ instead of a 3+. I'm going to say if any of those things pertain to you, it adds the reroll, and only if you don't like Star Wars, you get a -1.
Yeah, okay.
And a kick to the head. Da-na.
All right. So, Tom, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We really appreciate it.
Giving a little class to the place.
Yes, definitely.
No one ever says that to me, guys.
Oh, no, seriously. You're like the dean of podcasting gamerdom. That's awesome. And, Tom, if people want to find more about all your goings on there and your great shows, where should they do that?
You should check it out at dicetower.com. That's being revamped right now, but again, in 2016, it will be finished.
Nice.
So, or at least late summer. No, there's
what listeners need to realize is that Tom is planning on going into some sort of hypersleep for the next 12 months.
That would be nice. No, we have all sorts of things there. I like to tout, of course, our video stuff. We put out reviews almost every day of the week. We did about 800 reviews in 2014, so we should be able to do that many in 2015. So if you want to know about a game and don't want to listen to it for an hour and a half
or 4,
we try to keep our videos, around 10 minutes or so. So anyhow, it's a lot easier when you're looking at the components, though. So I'll give that.
Videos are awesome. I think you guys do a fantastic job over there. And as Tom says, they review just about every game on the planet. So if there's a game you want to know about, the Dice Tower has got it for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much again, Tom, for time out of your busy schedule.
We're not worthy.
We're definitely not. So thanks again, Tom, and thanks for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been fun talking to you and having an ally against Russ.
No, that's
except for
my
that
pleasure.
Hobby. This edition of Jever Notice is brought to you by our great friends that joined us at Patreon. That's right, the patrons that you've heard so much about that make it possible for us to drop a bunch of ads, make the show sleeker, and at the same time a lot more agile so that we can address things as they arise, making the show hopefully, maybe not, maybe it's still horrible or not too horrible, but hopefully better than it's ever been before. And in this particular segment, I'd like to thank David Kelly, Jake Middleton, Jim Kalmbach, Jeremy Lynn, and Kurt Zuzdak. I'm pretty sure I screwed at least one of those up, too. Anyway, thanks, guys, and thank everybody who's gone and checked out the Patreon page, especially those of you who've kicked in a little tip every now and then. We really do appreciate it, and it does make everything we're doing easier. So thanks. Did you ever notice how you've definitely got strengths and weaknesses? There are things that you're good at and things that maybe you are not so good at. For instance, I like to paint models. I'm pretty good at it. I like to convert models. I'm pretty good at that. I really like to just work with terrain and models, and I really like doing that sort of thing. Now, the mistake that many people in my life have made because I enjoy that sort of thing is that because I can make a tiny little table out of balsa wood look really cool, they think I can make a normal sized table out of things like real wood. And that just doesn't translate. Now, of course, the person who most egregiously falls into this category would be my wife, who doesn't understand why I can't do all sorts of things around the house, considering I've made countless houses at a smaller scale. So here I am. I've got a very strange... I'm in the pub, obviously, which is where I record, McNerdigan's Pub. And I've got, of course, some serious storage issues, as we all have. I brought down, of course, all my 40K stuff from the attic so that I could work on my my Horus Heresy army, my pre-Heresy army, my Sons of Horus. And it's still here, even though my army is all complete, not fully painted yet, but it's all built so I could put all of the extra bits and stuff away, but I haven't managed to do that yet. The weird thing about my house is that it was at one time a split-level ranch, and then at some time in the past, long before Karen and I bought the house, they added I always brain cramp on this word. An extension to the house, I guess, I don't know. Which upstairs is this awesome, beautiful, open concept living room, and downstairs was an empty space that is now the pub, which is a great, 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 great gaming space when it's not loaded with crap from the attic. And the weird thing, though, is that they didn't sort of like just build the extension so that the room outside of the extension to the pub like flows nicely in. Instead, there's this weird 3-foot wide gap of pretty much useless space where the I don't even know what the point of that space was. But so it's like a big wide open gap, and then there's the space, and then there's a nice door-sized hole to get into the pub, which is of course now finished and everything, except that outside of it is this big irregularly spaced cave thing. I don't even know. So for years I've been saying I needed shelving, because that was just where I dumped stuff that, I mean, like promo model. I have like a box of the Spartan games used to send me stuff so fast that I couldn't even open it before the next stuff came, and that's all in a box waiting to be given away. I mean, there's just boxes like that, and that's been here for like 3 years. I mean, just boxes like that, and they all just get shoved there. All of my cool Star Wars, Hearst Arts stuff was there, just in a pile. And so I thought, oh, it's going to be great. Someday I'm going to have it. I'm going to build shelves in there. Except that, of course, no shelf is going to actually fit in there because it's actually about two and a half feet wide, but it's like 3 feet deep. So it's a very strange shaped space. So for years and years and years, I've been thinking I really, really, really want to get shelving in there. Nothing really, came of it. At least 5 years ago, apropos, actually more like 10 years ago now, a friend of mine's father actually decided, we were talking about shelving, I don't know why, and he said he came up with this brilliant scheme to build shelving that was really cheap and inexpensive and easy to build, and that would be exactly what I would need. And he actually sketched it all out, and he gave it to me, like this idea, and I was like, oh, great, thanks. But it was in my mind, and it's been in my mind, and it's stayed in my mind this whole time. And so all of a sudden, I don't know. This is how things happen with me. Like things that are outside of my comfort zone, I will say no to doing them for years. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, I will decide that the time is right and I'll just do it. And that was this week. And I decided that I was going to do these shelves, gosh darn it, and nobody was going to stop me. So we had a bunch of scrap wood left over from when we did Moon Over Buffalo this semester, and for a reason that I don't know, but I maybe Providence, who knows, I had stopped my students from recycling this one group piece of wood or group bundle of wood, big pieces of 3/4 inch plywood and a bunch of 2x4s. So here was my plan. I was going to put up 4 shelves, and I was going to make them 36 inches deep, because, that's useful, and exactly as wide as the space, which, of course, on top of everything else, makes it even more difficult, because at 4 feet, or at 3 feet high, I should say, the space, there's like a shelf that evens out, so the space is even wider for 3 feet above. It's very confusing. So I decided I was going to, how hard could it be to cut out two 36 by 24 inch pieces of plywood and two 36 by whatever it is, like 30 inch pieces of plywood, whatever the measurement would make. And then what I decided was you're building 4 tables basically. And you've got the legs that are made out of 2x4s that are the height of the shelf. And so how hard would it be? I would need 4, 8, 12, 16 pieces of 2x4, cut at a very specific length, but no big deal. And then 4 pieces of plywood. So I have students that are really good with that sort of thing, that are like wood tech kind of guys that work in the wood shop. And the teacher who runs the wood shop is a friend and helps on the set and stuff. So I figured I would give the kid $5 to buy his lunch, because school lunch is cheap. And he could cut this wood, and it would be like, it would take him like 20 minutes. I figured, because I'm trying to think, if cutting balsa wood, at least 20 minutes maybe. And I figure it'll be all set. Then I'll bring it home. I'll just screw the 2x4s straight down from through the plywood, plop it right in there. Yeah, it'd be no problem. Well, first of all, it takes 3 days to cut the wood, because clearly I had absolutely nothing about cutting wood and how easy and or hard it is, and how complex it may or may not be to actually make right angles with a buzzsaw. See, I'm pretty sure buzzsaw is not even a term. So that was a pain in the butt. And so, but they did it. They were awesome. It cost me, way more because I felt really guilty. So I was bribing people left, right, and center. So I brought all that home. And of course, 3/4 inch plywood is ridiculously heavy. So this weekend I've got all the wood, and Karen's like, "What do you got this wood for? What do you think it's going to do?" Because she now knows me, so she's like, she knows I think I'm going to do something with this wood that may or may not actually come to fruition. So yesterday, it was just Reese and myself after Karen went to work. And I thought, let's make this, it'll make this a fun father-son event. I'm like, hey, buddy, we're going to make shelves. And he's like, okay. So I cleared out all that space, which he thought was great, because then he called it a cave and he was playing in there. And I made the first table. And at one point, he looked up at me and said, Dada, that's not a shelf. It's a table, which I thought was very funny. Now, I didn't mention that there's also heating pipes that mean that you can't just slide things into the space. It actually has to go in sideways and then fall into place. So that makes it even more difficult. So I finished my first piece. Boom, chunk, boom. No big deal. Thought it was great. Looked awesome. It's exactly the way I wanted it to be. I was like, yes, I'm on a roll. Of course, I ended up having to use metal brackets and everything to keep things at right angles that I hadn't even thought about. But eventually, I did it. Finished the second one. Took a lot longer, but again, boom, went right in there. Everything was great, awesome. Took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take. Took all day long, so I was like, oh, you know what, can't do it anymore. I got a word count that I still have to meet. I got a bunch of other stuff that I have to do, so Reese and I called it a day. So today we were going to do it again, and I'm thinking, okay, cool. Okay, yesterday it was, no big deal. Today it's, the pieces are a little bit wider, but it's going to be great. We're going to just sail right through it, and it's going to be fine. Yeah, no. So I made the table, and then realized that it was too wide to fit into the pipes, and so it took me an hour. I had to take everything apart, put it in, and then reattach everything in position, in situ, if you will. Almost killed myself. I'm bleeding. I cracked a fingernail. I mean, it's ridiculous. I am so not a carpenter. It's not even funny. And knowing what I had learned there, I thought, okay, so I had to take 2 of the legs off and then slide it in sideways and then pop it up and then put those 2 legs back on. This is going to be no big deal, right? When I do the top one, it's just going to be the same thing. So I do the same thing. Oh no, because up at the top, it's too high. It's too close to the ceiling, which of course is a bunch of pipes because this is some sort of utility area. And so I had to take all the legs off. It was a nightmare. It took me like 10 times the amount of time it took me yesterday. I finally finished it. I step back. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to have like this feeling of they're all crooked. Every one of them is crooked because I am an idiot. When it comes to wood, I am an idiot. And I could take it all down, eventually. But you know what? I'm going to leave the shelving up there because the shelving up there as it is a monument to how much of an idiot I am. And the next time Karen wants me to do any kind of fixer-upper around the house, Can you install a microwave? Can you install a dishwasher, et cetera, et cetera? I'm just going to take a little tour, bring her down here, and point out those pathetic shelves and say, do you want the man who took 2 days to put this mess up in our house to put in your lovely new dishwasher? I don't think so. And I don't think she will either. And so the moral of the story is work outside of your safety zone, because at the very least, you end up with an example of why you stay in your safety zone. That's all I've got to say about that. So thanks for listening. I know it went a little bit long. Good night.
Achievement unlocked. You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@the d6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA discussions forum on DACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.
All right, cool. So are we ready to do this? You guys think this is a decent topic? I think this will keep us going for 45 minutes.
It is, and I can see you worked hard at fleshing it out throughout the day.
Yes, well,
That is
sometimes
nobody ever calls him on that, Tom. That's phenomenal.
Sometimes you write something and you realize it's perfect the first time. There's really no reason to,
I was going to edit it and add all sorts of things, and I thought, no, it's Russ.
No, you don't need.
I don't want to let him.
No, thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. Thank you. I'm putting this in the blooper reel, Craig,
God,
just because I would do it to you.
Oh, God.
All right, great.